Okay, Mansoor, we are ready to begin the seminar. We will, I will start it. We will play a holding slide with some Malawi music for just a few minutes.
Okay.
So we open also the, the list of attendees and, okay, and we start soon.
Okay, that works.
Okay.
Welcome, Raymond.
Yeah.
Good morning and good afternoon to all. A very warm welcome. My name is Mansour Njai. I'm the head of inclusive growth at UNDP. It is my pleasure to moderate this session on social and human development in the African LDCs, reducing inequality and advancing well-being and opportunity, organized in collaboration with our UN sister agencies. Ministers, colleagues, participants, all protocol observed. This meeting comes at a pivotal moment, a time of unprecedented challenges. You would agree with me that the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to reverse 2 decades of steady progress on poverty reduction, has amplified pre-existing vulnerabilities and also exposed fault lines, such as inequality, which is growing, informal employment. In Africa, we have a total of 86% of informal employment. That's the share of total employment. Lack of social protection. 80% of the population does not have any coverage. Climate change, which is likely also to have an adverse impact on the incomes of the bottom 40%. Issues also related to fiscal space, debt sustainability, digital divide, and others that are disproportionately affecting women. And we do know that social norms are also playing an important barrier to women's economic empowerment and equality. All of this is undermining the realization of the SDGs. What we have seen recently is that global human development is on course to decline for the first time since 1990. Similarly, poverty is rising for the first time in 20 years. And a recent analysis done by UNDP found that up to 1 billion people could be living in extreme poverty by 2030. Latest estimates also point to over 300 million people in African LDCs that today live in extreme poverty. That is 43%, which is above the average in sub-Saharan Africa. But even worse, if we measure poverty from a multidimensional poverty, perspective, the proportion of poor then stands at a staggering 63% in African LDCs, which is the highest among all regions. All of this tells us that there is an urgent need for bold, collective, and coordinated action, not only by individual countries, but also by the international community in solidarity to correct course and build forward better with the SDGs in sight. Against this background, with its challenges, but also its opportunities, this session will present and discuss lessons, strategies, policies emerging across Africa and beyond to explore how progress towards human development can be accelerated in African LDCs in the post-COVID era. Let us not also forget that our deliberations will help shape the program of action for the LDCs for the next decade that will be adopted early 22. To do so, we have today a panel of distinguished speakers. And in order, we will have the Honorable Dr. Patricia Kaliati, the Minister of Gender, Community Development and Social Welfare of Malawi. Honorable Minister, a warm welcome to you. We also have Her Excellency Ms. Paula Ingabire, the Minister of Information and Communication Technology of Rwanda. Welcome to you, Minister. We'll also have His Excellency Mr. Alexander Chitebe, the Minister of National Development and Planning of Zambia. Welcome, Minister Chitebe. Dr. Raymond Gilpin, who is the Chief of Strategy Analysis and Research Team with UNDP Africa. Welcome, Raymond. Dr. Joel Anani, Regional Director for Africa, International Federation of Medical Students Association, IFMSA. And last but not the least, we also have Professor Arun Burat, the Director of Development Policy Research Unit, the University of Cape Town in South Africa. In order to help the meeting run as smoothly as possible in this virtual format, we just have a few housekeeping rules. Each speaker will be allocated 7 minutes to deliver his remarks and presentation. And we really ask you to keep to the time allocated because there are sessions right after hours. Second, if you are a speaker in this session, please keep your video on and your microphone muted while you're not speaking. If you are not a speaker in this session, please keep both your microphone and your video off. Kindly also note that we'll have French, English, and Portuguese interpretation available. The world shape button in the Zoom controlling panel at the bottom will allow you to toggle, between those languages. And finally, for the last part of this session, we'll have a Q&A that will give the opportunity to the floor, to the audience to share questions and perspectives. And for that, we'll ask you to please register your questions in the Q&A box and also raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Without further ado, let me turn to our first speaker, Honorable Minister Kaliati. As you know, African governments have made significant efforts to curb poverty and inequality. Yet these twin issues remain sticky. So my question to you is, what experience can you share about Malawi's interventions to reduce poverty and inequality, especially gender inequality and furthering human development? The floor is yours. You have 7 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, the moderator, and all my seniors present. In special mention Her Excellency, the Minister of Rwanda, the Minister of Zambia, the Chief Strategy Analysis for Undp Africa, the Mr. Anani, also the Regional Director for Africa International Federation of Medical Students Association, Mr. Horat, Director of Development Policy Research Unit, University of Cape Town, and government officials, and those listening on the Zoom. On behalf of Malawi government and on behalf of His Excellency the State President of the one who opened this session, and on my own behalf, I would like to thank you and thank the United Nations for making Malawi to host this Africa Region Review meeting. Indeed, I'm really honored to speak on this topic, social and human development in the Africa, least development countries, reducing inequality and also advancing well-being and opportunities. A number of factors contributing to the high prevalence of poverty and inequality in least developing countries, i.e. Malawi. We have floods as well as drought due to climate change, resulting to low agricultural production and increased food prices and also food insecurity. High level of gender-based violences, which we have in Malawi and also globally. We have 34% of women who are either physically or sexually abused, and 42% girls are married before age 18 of birthday, affecting their productivity. Further, the GBV is also the gender-based violence, presenting economic growth by diverting resources from their optional use, as well as the are spent on goods as well as services related to gender-based violences. We have the civil strife and also political instability, such as the conflict between political parties, leading to lost life, lost enabling environment for businesses. And Mr. Monsieur, we have also the rapid urbanization create slum conditions with limited access to essential services such as water, sanitation, waste management, and electricity, making urban dwellers increasingly unavailable increasingly vulnerable to various shocks such as pandemics. We have variant energy availability and also price negatively affecting small and medium enterprises, thereby lowering their contribution to social and economic development for the country. The COVID-19, which has hit us so hard, has affected development gains in these development countries. The pandemic has made things harder for women and girls in Malawi, from loss of jobs, failed businesses, high rate of school dropouts, and also teen pregnancies, to increased gender-based violences, particularly rape and defilement. There are multiple factors that limit least developing countries' poverty eradication efforts. For instance, in Malawi, the factors include the limited access to financial resources, particularly by women and the youth, who comprise the biggest population in the country, thereby limiting their participation in the development agenda. Inadequate support to women farmers and entrepreneurs. Women have limited access to markets as a result of transport costs and cultural norms that restrict women's travel outside their communities. Limited access to processing of value-added technology resulting in most agricultural production from women farmers being as low as value and also quality. Your Excellencies and all my seniors, we have underdeveloped rural infrastructure. This challenges is a major constraint on agriculture and small scale and medium enterprises, as it affects the cost and also continuity of production and the quality of products. Failures to make international aid a catalyst for development by not utilizing it to develop financial services for the poor, improving infrastructure, implementation of land reform, building mechanisms, and also small and medium enterprises to create a diversity and also modern rural sector. And lack of limited understanding by lateral donor institutions in the actual causes of poverty and how those causes have been and can be effectively addressed. The moderator and all my seniors, I would like to conclude my remarks by highlighting how to accelerate progress towards human development through addressing aspects contributing to poverty and inadequate in the African least developing countries. These include addressing lack of population growth and high fertility through provision of sexual and reproduction health services, promoting female education and also women economic empowerment. For example, the Malawi government is constructing more boarding secondary schools in increasing female enrollment. On addressing gender-based violences, it is critical to implement prevention strategies to reduce cost of services, supporting services, and on engaging men as change agents and also perpetrators, such as engaging men on ending all forms of gender-based violences and harmful practices, and awareness on available roles. Malawi government has developed a strategy champion in the elimination of all forms of discrimination and also violence against women and girls at workplace, at home, in communities, and in all spheres of life. Addressing gender inequalities due to poor educational attainment, lack of infrastructure, limited access to information and communication technology in this era of COVID-19, energy and transportation services, government need to implement innovative and sustainable policies and programs. For example, policies and program, Malawi has launched a digital platform available for web and also mobile services or devices as an app called 50 Million African Women Speak. To improve women entrepreneurs' access to local and international markets, Malawi is also empowering women in business cooperatives, loan and also savings programs, and implementing early childhood development programs. We are focusing very much on the early child development as to make a quality education and also to make sure that women, girls and boys live longer in schools before they turn marriage age. But what we're looking forward as a Minister of Gender, making sure that even if they reach a marriage age, but we want to see that all girls and boys that are in tertiary education at the marriage age, so that they can make the rightful decision and when to marry and who to date. And also assisting the government and the president in developing this nation in one way or another when they live longer in schools. This is critical now that traveling physically is limited with the COVID-19 epidemic. And that's why we are saying we are very much focusing and constructing a number of hostels. And with the climate change problems, we are also making sure that we are planting a lot of trees, which the Minister of Water and Forest will be tackling those issues tomorrow. Leveling the food system both on and off the farm. This includes by raising smallholder farmers' agricultural productivity, complementary public investment in agricultural research and also extension, irrigation, and also rural infrastructure, inclusive value chain development and also technology leapfrogging, mitigating fragile by having risk management solutions with the roles for both the private and public sector, and also incentivizing the public as also private sectors to act before the shocks and also conflict occurs. Addressing the poverty financing gap by having effective also public financing focused on the poor. For instance, in line with the social protection for sustainable development strategy, target 1 bullet 3 of Malawi is implementing a number of microfinance projects and also the social protection programs. For instance, the National Economic Empowerment Fund, which we are focusing very much on women as well as youth. This is empowering women and the youth to access entrepreneurship skills and also finances for businesses, ventures in rural and as well as urban areas. The social protection program targets 20% of the population and also has expanded the coverage of the social cash transfer program from the 28,000 household level in 2012 to 293,000 households in 2021. And in 2022, we'll be scaling also beyond this. This is aimed at improving health and nutrition as well as skills of the poorest by building their human capacity for improved livelihood. As government, under the leadership of His Excellency, the State President of the Lazarus government, we are very much focused on making sure that women and the youth are really taking part in the development of the nation by having a number of programs, which some of them we've highlighted and some of them they are all on the ground. The ministers and all stakeholders, they are really busy making sure that women are participating in each and every program of government. I'm very much confident that poverty and inequality in the least developing countries can be dealt with if aspects contributing to both are addressed. We'd like to thank you very much for honoring Malawi to be with us, and we promise that with the support from our donors and CSOs and NGOs, and also with the support from a number of stakeholders, we are going to be there and we make sure that these programs are going to be addressed by donors being supporting the programs which we will set aside for the women and youth of Malawi, the less privileged, like the persons with disability, albinism, and also the elderly who are supposed to be taking part in all these programs. We'd like to thank you very much. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister Kaliati. And I think this was an excellent overview of Malawi's challenges, the multidimensional challenges, but also how you focused on addressing the key drivers of poverty and inequality, including women's empowerment, including investing in the agricultural sector, but yet also dealing with the issue of fiscal space and how to increase funding, to support the key programs like social protection that you mentioned. Thanks again. Thanks so much. This was very, very useful. Let me now turn to our next speaker, the Honorable Minister Ingabire from Rwanda. As you know, UNDP is supporting countries across the world to take advantage of the power of digital transformation. So, Minister, my question to you is, from your perspective, what role can technology and digitalization play to support structural transformation and accelerate development? The floor is yours, Minister. You have 7 minutes. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ndiaye. Honorable ministers, dear participants, greetings from Kigali. And I'll jump straight into your question, Ndiaye. And like you rightly said, UNDP has been a great partner when it comes to helping us find innovative type of solutions to the challenges that we are facing or grappling with in our different jurisdictions. I think very specifically for Rwanda, they've been a partner for many years. And case in point, recently as we started finding ways of how we deal with the pandemic and address it, the support of UNDP came in very handy on how we can leverage emerging technologies to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so thanks to that partnership, today we're able to leverage the use of robots in really supporting how our frontline health workers. So most of these robots are placed in the COVID-19 treatment centers at the airport. They help with so we have two versions. The first version was really focused on how do we help frontline health workers, doing the routine work of, measuring vitals, broadcasting messages in places where you have lots of people convening, and specifically at the airport where you have most people coming in large numbers, and rather than having people line up to be tested, you have a robot with the capability to really scan hundreds of people and be able to identify anyone that needs further examination. And so that has been very helpful. Not only does it reduce on the time, but also it allows our health workers to really focus on the more strategic work of dealing with our patients. And even more recently, we're able to benefit from the same support to have robots that were able to that have the capability to disinfect both small and large spaces. And so the work that could ordinarily take close to 6 hours is now coming down to about 30 minutes. And this is really the role of technology. What are the kind of efficiencies that technology is able to to bring to life in these different aspects. But let me respond very specifically to the question that you asked, Ndiaye, which is really around the role of technology in supporting structural transformation. And this kind of transformation, we're looking all the way from whether it's agriculture, manufacturing, service industry. And I think we have an underlying theme, which is, for technology, it's always going to be an enabler to all these key economic sectors of any economy. And but also unlocking the opportunities, and I'll go into details, opportunities around how we improve services, how we generate more productivity and efficiency, how we become more transparent in our service delivery. Employment creation being a key aspect of how technology can be best put to use. Access to information is the core of being able to leverage the capabilities around technology, market access. But how can many of these things be achieved in a way that is going to reduce some of the risks? And when we talk about risks, we're talking about risks and challenges of inequality, challenges of loss of jobs or limited jobs, job polarization, challenges and risks around digital divide, challenges around privacy and security in general that will come with even the ability to use the different digital technologies. But the only way we're able to do that is how do we ensure that we are deploying digital infrastructure that everyone is able to access for all. I think the statistics are glaring in the sense that you have slightly above 50% of the global population today that is connected to the internet, for example. And the biggest chunk of those that are not connected is on the African continent. So if we're really thinking about the benefits that come with leveraging digital technologies, yet we still have a big size of our population on the continent that is still unconnected, then there's a missed opportunity there. The other thing is, even today we're talking about the Africa Free Trade Continental Trade Agreement. How do we foster digital trade and ensure market openness? How do we leverage international cooperation to contribute to how we can integrate our various markets? And this is where technology comes in handy to sort of play that enabling role, but provide also the platforms to do so. But also, how do we make digital transformation work for both the private sector and the government? So from a public sector perspective, you're talking about service delivery first and foremost. That applies as well to the private sector. Although when you're looking at private sector, you're also going to think about concepts around e-commerce. And so I think unlocking that, whether it's the ability for an SME to access a broader market that they would necessarily be able to if it was a typical brick and mortar type of business. We talk about financial inclusion. That's really a key aspect that we're seeing technology unlock opportunities, especially in terms of bridging the inequalities that exist. And I think on the African continent, we're seeing very good examples of how the mobile technology has been a key driver for financial inclusion, whether we're leveraging mobile money kind of applications, the USSD technology, but really ensuring that most of the people on the continent that are unbanked have access to some form of financial services and products. The other role that we see that technology is playing is really helping workers to adapt. I think when you look at, there've been many silver linings when you look at the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think digital transformation is one of them. But how the kind of tools that have been put to our disposal in enabling our workers, both in the private sector, civil society, and government, to continue to work for businesses to stay afloat, that's when you start to see many countries, many firms being able to cash in on the digital investments that they've already been able to make. Then, of course, the key thing that we also see is around skilling, and I think this is it's a shared challenge that we see across the continent. Really assessing the kind of the skills that are going to be needed. How are we empowering the workforce for the future? What kind of skills are we giving them? Today, we're talking about blended learning models because we know how heavily the education system has been disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. In many cases where some of our children across the continent may not even have access to learning through a radio. And so how do we start to think about the necessary investments that we need to make going forward in terms of blended learning approaches that will put us in a better position should we be faced with a similar kind of pandemic? And of course, finally, I think one of the things we need to be looking at is really talking about privacy and security and promoting trust. And these are some of the risks that we have to continuously be able to mitigate as we deploy the different digital technology tools and platforms. And many of these are going to be addressed through, a mix of policy and strategy instruments, regulations, and support tools that we put in place to ensure that much as technology is promising to really unlock structural transformation, but in an accelerated manner, we can also look at some of the downside or the unintended consequences that would come with that and build in mitigation measures to address that. So in a nutshell, I think this, especially at a time like this when we are having such a conversation, it's very clear what the role of technology is going to be. We're going to have to skill our people even more. We're going to have to think about how we are leveraging these tools to achieve much more productivity and efficiency, but at the same time, really thinking about issues around security and privacy going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Ngabire. That was very insightful, and clearly what came out from your presentation is really the opportunity to leverage and harness technology as an enabler for more efficiency, more productivity, as an enabler also to unlock opportunities. And I see here, the focus that you put on, improve service delivery, access to finance, the scaling bit, and really opening, I would say, forward-looking solutions for structural transformation. I think that's really the key message here, how we can harness technology in a forward-looking way to really boost structural transformation. Thanks so much for your insights. Very, very useful. Let me now turn to the Honorable Minister Alexander Chitebe to seek maybe perspective on the broader challenges here. And I'll have maybe two questions for the Honorable Minister Chitebe. First, in your perspective, what interventions are needed to accelerate transformation in African LDCs in general, in order really to reduce poverty, I would say even eradicate it, address inequality, and further human development? And then, taking that as a broader question, how can Africa leverage its use as agents of change, its use in women to accelerate development and well-being, and to harness the demographic dividend? Minister, I'll give you 9 minutes since you have two questions, just to be fair. So the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me the 9 minutes. And should I begin by passing my greetings from here, Zambia, from lovely people of Zambia, and to the excellencies, the ministers, and all the other people on the panel. I'm afraid my lighting isn't so good, so I'll try by all means to try and get my point across very quickly and beat the 9 minutes that have been allocated to. Let me begin by thanking you for giving me this opportunity to speak on this very important Africa Regional Review meeting. I wish to begin by addressing the issue of policy and the problematic interventions needed to address poverty, hunger, and the low human capital transformation. I believe that was the first question, or am I mistaken? I would want clarity on that one.
Minister, you're correct. The first question was about interventions that accelerate structural transformation in LDCs and to reduce poverty, inequality, and further human development.
Right. I will begin with at program level where what Zambia is doing to try and get away from this scourge that has really held a lot of countries by the neck. Let me begin by saying that in Zambia, we have put up programs that are very similar to other countries, but that have been done at a very heightened level and at a very, very good speed. For example, to help our farmers, we have introduced what we call FISIP, that's Farmer Input Support Programs, where we help vulnerable farmers to make sure that they can graduate from being small seasoned farmers into a middle class and then go into the commercial and large scale production of mostly our staple food, which is maize. We've also introduced what we are calling food security packs. These are given to vulnerable families where they are lacking, to make sure that we make sure that no one is left behind, in making sure that we continue with our development agenda and making sure that we eradicate the poverty that is very prevalent in our African countries and in Zambia in particular. We have improved on statistics from rural to urban poverty. We have moved some basis points, but that is not enough. We still need to do more. That's why we've also introduced what we call the social cash transfer, just like in the case of Malawi. But we have scaled this up. We started with 38 districts in 2016, and we have moved now to all the 116 districts in the country. We have increased the number of households that are benefiting from the social cash transfer. And this is what is helping us in terms of programs to make sure that we can intervene and move away from being in the least developed countries. There is also the first 1,000 days concept or program that we are applying to make sure that within the first 1,000 days from birth, we upscale the nutrition factor. We make sure that these people have provisions and that they've got what they need to stand that 1,000 days. We are also scaling up nutrition, which is a program that has been introduced into the country to make sure that all the nutritional needs are improved, not only with high value foods, but also with foods that can be, cultivated by the people themselves, but have got nutritional content that they can get from all other foods except for all these expensive food that they can get. Let me also mention that at the national level, the scourge of poverty, the hunger, has been a recurring development concern, and as such, a central theme for national development plans in Zambia, where we have made sure that we have integrated data specifically for development purposes in our national development plans and in our economic recovery plans, so that we can make sure that we leave no one behind. We also spend less for more to make sure that we try and get interventions to alleviate poverty, hunger, and low human capital formation. Let me again now begin to address the issue, the second question. To share on the ramifications of the issue of African leveraging its significant youthful and female population to accelerate sustainable development in the region, including harnessing the demographic dividend. I would like to begin by stating that all of us have to appreciate that our population is one of our greatest assets as Africans world over. With the 2030 projected population growth rate, there will be nearly 60 million more children aged between 0 and 9, almost 110 million young people aged between 10 and 24, and 96 million more women of reproductive age. I am certain that the population age structure in many countries and in Zambia mirrors that of many other LCDs, with 79.9% of its population being below 35 years, while 46% below 15 years. My government has increasingly paid attention to the benefits of harnessing the demographic dividend. In 2015, Zambia undertook the demographic dividend study to assess its economic and human development potential. Recommendations from the study have been adopted in the 7th National Development Plan, like I said earlier, and I am certain that the 8th National Development Plan, which is being couched now, will equally benefit from the demographic dividend operation plan, which was put with key objective is to provide strategic direction on harnessing the demographic dividends. And additionally, Zambia has launched its 2019 National Population Policy, which focuses on the integrating population dynamics into all developmental planning, financing, implementation, monitoring, and accounting processes. We believe that this will enable Zambia to monitor critical interventions required to harness the demographic dividend. Moderator, informed by these reflections, allow me to put forward some very basic recommendation or what we need as a country, as Africa, as least developed countries, to make sure that we can harness the youth, harness the women. We have got deliberate policies in Zambia. For example, we access a facility with the World Bank where we brought in what we call the Jewel program, where we deliberately want to put women first, so that the women and the children and those that dropped out because of early pregnancies or early marriages are going back into school and they are finishing their school, so that we can also harness their potential. We have made various interventions in skills training to make sure that the youth does not only get empowered through education to become that doctor that you want or the accountant, but they can have skill. And that's the survival skill that they can do bricklaying, they can go and do welding and all other issues to make sure that that skill also and that youth population is harnessed and brought up together. We're also appealing into our cooperating partners and those other social players to make sure that they can come together to build capacity into this very important population group, so that we can harness that potential and make sure that it works for the development of the country. Moderator, I hope I haven't taken too much of the 9 minutes, and I hope to end here, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister Chiteme. You've been right on time. So no, you didn't, take too much time. And this was very, very useful. And I really appreciated the fact that you focused on investing in a sector where a large part of the African population, depend for its living, which is agriculture, to really invest in agriculture, but also to make sure that we address the needs of the youth by investing, in deliberately in policies that provide more access to opportunities, to resources, but also to skills to really, empower the youth to become, fully agents of change. Thanks so much, Minister, for your insights. Let me now turn to my UNDP colleague, maybe to chime in also on the same kind of challenges, but from a development agency's perspective. Dear Raymond, what would be your take on the key interventions that are needed to accelerate transformation in African LDCs in order to reduce poverty, inequality, and really foster human development? Raymond, the floor is yours. You have 7. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mansour, and I'm really pleased to be here, to be part of such an illustrious panel. It's been very informative and also encouraging to hear African leaders and the ministers here present speak to such important issues with both passion and focus, because Africa's development challenges have endured for quite a while. COVID has been a major disruptor, and we now stand at a point where we could look back and see what lessons that we could learn and look forward to see how we could address these. We've been at points like this in various stages in our history, but I think this one is different because COVID has not only led to reversed development, as you rightly alluded, Mansour, but it has also reshaped the way we think, the way we work, and the way our economies operate. Before COVID, a lot of African countries were making the necessary investments, etc., and also policy changes. But COVID could push as many as 43 million Africans back into extreme poverty. Because of COVID, 100 million Africans who were able to afford sustainable energy could no longer do so. Because of COVID, 168 million Africans are now more food insecure than they were before. Because of COVID, some economies are going to contract. The challenge now becomes, how could we reimagine the future from both a policy and programmatic perspective? But inequalities lie at the core of this. And there are 4 main inequalities I want to highlight here. Access to justice, access to technology, access to finance, and access to social services. Without a focus on these 4 inequalities, we'll continue to see so many of our women left behind, so many African youth without any hope, and also so many people who are geographically distant from major cities, not having the wherewithal to be productive. And so what could we do from a policy and programmatic perspective? I think from a policy and programmatic perspective, there are 4 important things that we need to do. First is, I think we need to think about how we integrate our solutions. Yes, individual programs and projects are great, but development in Africa post-COVID is a complex challenge. And here, what we want to have is the mindset of solving a complex challenge and not just answering specific questions. We can answer specific questions relating to technology, relating to agriculture, relating to non-formal sector. which is good, but it does not bring the synergistic approach to complement that highlights both complementarity and sequencing. And so Africa's development progress is no longer a la carte. We shouldn't think about picking how to work with this donor or that institution, but it has to be both sequence and complementary. The second thing that we need to focus on is structural economic transformation. African countries are Africa is the only continent where, for the majority of the countries, the structure of African economies is roughly the same as it was in 1960. This explains why Africa is not as much of a player in the global economy, and why African economies struggle. Structural economic transformation does not mean just move away from agriculture to manufacturing or services. Structural economic transformation demands that we think through how we utilize all the resources that Africa has, its human capital, its mineral wealth, its agricultural wealth, its maritime economy. How do we put all of these together with technology, with a focus on inequality to work towards a different outcome? The third thing I think we need to do is re-engineer Africa's trading environment. Last year's World Development Report focused on global value chains, and one of the things that was mentioned was that if we have improvements in the way our value chains are managed, we could have a more direct impact on GDP growth than trade. What does this mean? It means that we need to focus on value retention within the value chain, productive capacity. So more of the value of what Africa produces remains on the continent. In the agricultural sector, even in the looking at the cell phone industry, less than 5% of the value of those industries remains on the African continent. We need to do that. And so value retention in trade is important. Value creation is also important, which is why within the context of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area arrangement, we have to ensure that we push forward, not just with the fourth industrial revolution, but also with manufacturing. We hear a lot about leapfrogging manufacturing and now doing services, but if you look at the import bill of African countries, manufacturing could help bring that down significantly and also be the kind of job creator that we want to see. And by expanding job opportunities, we're doing so with inequality in mind, so that we're ensuring that our youth, the women, those who are geographically distant in the rural areas can all participate. So that's the third thing. A fourth thing I want to mention very quickly, and I'm running out of time, is African countries need to prioritize social protection. And this means both contributory and non-contributory social protection. Because of COVID, we've seen a lot of countries doing cash transfers, revisiting social protection. But in a few of the countries, it is being rolled out more as another form of aid or charity to people who are going through a difficult time. No, this should be viewed as a strategic investment in building human capacity, giving people a safety net and breathing space to be able to invest and thrive there, and by so doing, be a lot more economically. So I've said a lot about what we are doing, etc., what we plan to do, etc. But what is Undp doing? Just very quickly, on the African continent last year, we launched UNDP's strategic offer in Africa. And in this offer, which is on our website, we have espoused this synergistic approach to development, where we're not just focusing on what projects we can do, but we're focusing on how we can work with African countries to organize development progress around 6 impact areas: natural resource governance, structural economic transformation, women and youth employment, climate change and mitigation, and affordable, sustainable energy, and peace and security, which are underpinned by foundational enablers, which run everything from governance to digitization to cooperation and development intelligence. The point is that the 6 impact areas have at their core specific interventions that address the inequalities I mentioned in the beginning: access to finance, access to justice, access to technology, and access to services. And this enables us to be able to make meaningful strides with social and human development, and also address both vertical and horizontal inequalities in African countries and societies. Without this, I don't believe that from a programmatic and policy perspective, we will be able to accelerate towards building forward stronger, better, and more sustainably. Thank you very much, Mansour. I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Raymond. This was very, very useful, and I would just summarize it maybe with 3 key messages. For me, the first is to protect, more social protection, to empower, more access to justice, more access to technology, more access to finance, and then transform, but rethink transformation. Really have, a better approach at not only creating but retaining value. Thanks so much, Raymond. Those were very, very useful insights. Let me now give the floor to Dr. Anani, and just look at ways that we could best unleash the creative power of the youth to build forward better. So, Dr. Anani, my question to you is, what are the key areas for a new program of action that you would see to secure a better future for the youth in African LDCs? The floor is yours. You have 7 minutes. Dr. Anani, you may be muted. We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now, please?
Now it works. Please go ahead. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I was saying that sub-Saharan Africa has recorded a remarkable economic performance in the first 15 years of the 21st century. It is accompanied by a perspective and modest decline of overall poverty. This economical growth is unfortunately accompanied by a fragile inequality in the distribution of wealth on the continent. It was reasonable to know that the reduction of the poverty and inequality has become the overreaching objective of the Sustainable Development Goal 2030. Indeed, 40% of people in Africa live below the extreme poverty. Countries are fighting over water. Livestock and population continue to be descended by famine. Why are we getting poorer and poorer when our states are officially experiencing economical growth? This is because growth often occurred in sectors characterized by low absorption of unskilled labor. Yet, we hold all this key to significantly reduce inequality in our society. For this session, I have consulted colleagues from nearly 20 countries in Africa and came to the conclusion that action on three main axes could be decisive in the fight against poverty in Africa. And these three areas involve the youth. The first one is the internet access. For example, the peasant in his village who cannot sell his products, who may only need an internet connection to boost his visibility and make economical growth or ecological trade. The internet connection could change the life of the whole family of this child called Kofi that has 20 years old in his village. Indeed, a visibility on the internet and his life could change, and he could later assert himself in the international scene. The internet connection is a tool of opportunity for youth. Access for the population, especially the non-urban population, should be a priority in the fight to reduce socio-economic inequalities. The second area that we agreed on was the youth innovation capacity, the support for the youth innovation capacity. Incentives to innovation continue to increase all over the continent. We can cite some politicians like Obama or Kagame who do not hesitate to launch programs to encourage youth people to innovate. Young people who innovate, we can see them everywhere, but which kind of support is reserved to them? Unfortunately, in order to grow, many of them resolve to leave the continent, causing a brain drain that is increasing the impoverishment of the continent. Supporting youth innovation is one of the key in the search for solutions to reduce poverty and inequality. The last and the third one is the seek for endogenous solution and invest in local values. The current pandemic, the current health crisis of COVID-19 has put a facet of Africa that we do not necessarily know. Young people have taken initiative and proposed extraordinary local solution to local problems. We have seen the development on the continent of, for example, artificial respiratories, something that we thought possible only with big industrial means. Digital solutions to various problems have spread all over the continent. In reality, all that was needed was an open-mindedness and an incentive to rely on local solutions. We realize with this pandemic that we don't necessarily have to look outward to move forward. At the same time, the health crisis is showing us our limits in many areas and is sounding like an alarm on the need to invest in local value, in youth local values. Internet access, support for youth people capacity for innovation, and search for endogenous solution and a foundation that will surely help us to make giant strides in the fight against poverty and socio-economic inequalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anani, for those great insights on the key enablers to empower youth. And I really know three strong messages that you shared with us. First being to address the digital divide. This is an issue that has been also touched upon by a number of speakers before you. Second is to build innovation capacity, to allow really to reap the potential of innovation and keep it, retain it in the continent. And the third is really to better value the bottom-up approach in terms of solutions and innovation. And I like that. Thanks again so much for your insights. Very, very useful. The floor is now to our last speaker, Professor Borat. I will have a question for you on the innovative enablers that can be used to achieve well-being, that can simultaneously address the issues of poverty, inequality, including the empowerment of women and girls, and human capital in African LDCs. Professor Borat, the floor is yours for 7 minutes, please.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I guess I want to start out with the background statement, which is really that if you're thinking about poverty and inequality reduction in any society, it is ultimately almost as a second order outcome from economic growth, a requirement that you need incomes through the generation of employment. So ultimately, the generation of jobs, if you like, is what is going to be your most sustainable long-run path to a reduction in poverty and inequality. So if that's the sort of background frame and framework that you utilize, it seems to me, at least in this context, that there are sort of 4 key things that we need to take care of, and I'll run through each of them within the sub-Saharan African context. The first is you've got to keep an eye on what's happening in terms of the future and in the long run, what's happening to your demographic projections and the demographic profile of your countries. Now, while the data is heterogeneous across countries, in essence, what we find is that projections from the UN will indicate that by 2100, 37.5% of all individuals of working age will be African. So let me just repeat that, right? So currently, we have a population of working age that is African globally at about 10%. So 10% of all Africans globally of working age constitute the world's workforce. That number is going to triple, more than triple, to 37.5%. Why that's important, right? And I just want to hang that, and I'll come back to it, is that is the scale of the jobs challenge, right? So think of this as, and the number, if I could just get it quickly, is 2.4 billion. So think of this as a ballpark figure for the growth projection for the region, for the continent, to 2100. And while that is partly a population, dynamic populations grow, the key thing is that our share, right, of the global labor force in sub-Saharan Africa is going to dramatically increase, which ultimately means a dramatic jobs requirement. I want to caution against the sort of tendency to make this a region-wide statement. There's a lot of heterogeneity, right, in the population growth figures that you have. And in fact, the data shows that 5 countries account for more than half of this population growth or the working age growth. So recalibrate that. That means that 5 countries account for more than 50% of the jobs target for the region to 2100. And that's a really important statement, and perhaps also a statement about where we need to concentrate our efforts in terms of a country focus. So then that gets to my second point, which is where do the jobs come from, right? Well, currently, right, we have a problem. We have a problem in terms of jobs that are going to generate sustainable livelihoods and, in fact, see increases in income in sub-Saharan Africa. What do the data show? The data show that if you look at the share of the working poor, and I can explain that in the Q&A how you calculate it, but the share of the working poor in total employment in sub-Saharan Africa was the highest of all the regions in the world, 37.3%. Now, why it's important in a relative context is that the youth unemployment rate in sub-Saharan Africa is actually one of the lowest of all the regions, right, in sub-Saharan Africa. So we don't have a problem in a relative scale. of youth unemployment as much as we have a problem of the working poor. So we have individuals, if you like, in ILO speak, in bad jobs. The Lewis model, colleagues, and my dear friend Raymond Gilpin has picked up on this. You can see the two economists on the panel about structural transformation. The Lewis model, where individuals move from agriculture, sustainable, livelihood type jobs, livelihood work into wage jobs, that Lewis model is broken currently in sub-Saharan Africa. So as a consequence, not only do we have the highest share of the working poor in the world as a share of the total employed, we have the lowest share of the employed who are in wage employment. Only 23% of the African employed are in wage employment. So individuals in the Lewis model sense don't have a wage job to go to, right? And that is the point, and this is my third key point, which is, how do you think about patterns of structural transformation? All of this, colleagues, appropriate patterns of structural transformation will lead to higher levels of wage employment, which will then be the trigger for a reduction in poverty and inequality. If you have patterns of structural transformation of a specific type, and I'll get to that, you will absorb a larger number of young people and women into wage employment. What do we mean by structural transformation? Well, the one line answer is this famous Lewis model, right? The Caribbean economist who won the Nobel Prize, is that economies in general on the long course of economic development will move from agriculture through to manufacturing into services. It's what is latterly called the Asian model of development, but in many ways, it's the only model of development we have in modern economic history, right? That puts manufacturing at the front and center of a industrialization process for an economy. I don't think that's the only route to industrialization. However, the counterfactual is one would find it very difficult to find an economy moving to middle or high income country status without parts of manufacturing doing something, being part of that story. The problem is that in sub-Saharan Africa, most of the data shows that our manufacturing share of GDP has actually declined in some cases, and in almost all countries, it's flatlined. So you haven't seen a change in manufacturing share of GDP. That, in one sense, points and alludes to the breakdown of a process of structural transformation. We need to figure out a way to get those sectors in urban areas, those sectors that principally are manufacturing, but also services, higher productivity services jobs, energized and moving so that they are absorbing people from rural areas into urban wage jobs. That's the key thing, right? If that's not happening, because currently the pattern of structural transformation is of individuals moving from rural areas into low productivity services jobs, i.e. the informal sector. That's not a sustainable process of structural transformation, and it's certainly not a process that's going to sufficiently and effectively reduce poverty and inequality in a society. In the 30 seconds I have left, the one way to think about economic development is this notion of economic complexity and capabilities, that instead of focusing on a sector, manufacturing, or latching onto fourth industrial revolution type sectors, figure out the capabilities that you currently have in an economy. It may be in chemicals, it may be in cocoa, it may be in wood products. Figure out those capabilities and go and develop expertise in products that are nearest to the existing product that you are exporting or have capabilities in. There's a deep literature on building economic complexity in a society, and I think that's a really important point of departure for thinking about this as a form of structural transformation that ultimately can reduce poverty and inequality, and at the same time absorb young people and women into the labor market. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Professor Burat. Very, very insightful, very strong messages that kind of really forces us to rethink. And the messages are that first, we should have at the center of our policy agenda issue of job creation. How do we go about it? And for that, rethinking, structural transformation along the lines of what patterns make most sense given our endowments and what capacities shall we build, not necessarily manufacturing. It's a possibility, but also look potentially into, higher productivity, higher value, services, and sectors as an alternate way of looking into this. Thanks so much. Very useful. I guess this will trigger some conversations. Let me now turn to the last part of our session, which is the question and answers from the floor. I understand we may have a question from our colleagues from UN Women. Is that confirmed? If not, I can move to a couple of questions that we have from the floor. And
yes,
please.
Yes, Mansour.
Yes, please.
From UN Women.
Please, Clara, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Clara Nyangwe. I am the head of UN Women in Malawi. I just have a really short contribution to make. Thank you very much. I just wanted to add or to complement what the Honorable Minister from Gender said. Actually, we all know that the cost of gender inequality is very high. Studies have shown that gender gaps cost nations 15% of their GDPs. For LDCs, this is huge, and it is a major cause of underdevelopment with serious consequences on human development outcomes. We've talked a lot about agricultural development. I just want to make reference to a study that was conducted by the World Bank, UN Women, UNEP, and Undp. It was on the cost of gender gap in agricultural productivity. And it shows that if nations could close the gender gap in agricultural productivity, they could lift up to 238,000 persons out of poverty annually. This is what the study shows. And I just want to take our minds to COVID-19. Schools were closed. Most of the schools in the urban areas went online. What about that little boy and that little girl in the village who's never seen a computer, no access to electricity? So rural transformation is really critical for LDCs if we want to improve on human development outcomes. I want to end by saying that it is high time we interrogate macroeconomic policies. We interrogate them from a gender equality and a rights perspective. These policies must have a human face. For example, to achieve better human development outcomes, we must look at the impact of critical macroeconomic variables like debt management, taxation, interest rate fixing, unemployment, the impact of this on the most marginalized, who are women, youth, and persons living in rural areas, especially persons with disability. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sticking to a very brief set of remarks. Very much appreciated. And just wanted to confirm what you were saying about the cost of the gender gap. I do recall that in UNDP, we had our 2016 Africa Human Development Report that actually estimated that around $100 billion are lost due to gender gap every year, which is just huge. So definitely supportive of your points, and an opportunity here that could be harnessed to really address the challenges we have before us. Let me now maybe turn to our panel. I think we have a couple of questions. I will start maybe with Minister Ingabire. We have a question from the floor for you. And the question is that in an effort to widen the revenue tax base, some LDCs on the continent are targeting imposing tax on data bundle. I guess this relates to mobile phones and so on and so forth. And what is your take on that? Is that the right way to to approach this issue? What potential impact can we have on the development of infrastructure and technology. The second question that I have here is what kind of financial support opportunities are there for LDCs to reach and harness the demographic dividend? Maybe here I may turn to our colleagues from the let me just come in. Our colleagues from not sure whether the Minister of Zambia is still around. That would be a good question for him. If Minister Shitame, are you still around? Would you kindly think of how best to secure financial support to harness the demographic dividend? And then from my own end, I will have maybe a follow-up question for Professor Borat, and maybe also for Raymond to time on this. As we are looking at how best to reset structural transformation, we also have this opportunity that may unlock, a lot of growth in terms of trade is properly addressed, which is the African, continental free trade area. So my question is really, what kind of specific entry points do you see? And here I'm referring to Professor Borat's remarks, saying that we may look into, potential high value or high service, sectors. What potential sectors do you see? And Raymond, also, do you see any clear opportunity to better harness this regional integration, platform that's out there for us? Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you, Ndiaye. I think that the question that you asked was coming from Sarah, and I thank her for that. But maybe just straight to the point. I think for any economy, any form of digital tax that has to be imposed should also, not be done in isolation of what are some of those support structures that need to be put in place to sort of like fast track and drive adoption of these digital products and services. So especially when you're looking at LDCs, I think there's so many challenges that one would be grappling with, from, a whole range from, you still have a big percentage of the population that still doesn't have access to quality infrastructure. The digital literacy skills are still very low. And so when you start to impose taxes too early in the game, there's a danger around that. And the danger is that the citizens will always have alternatives that are not digital in nature. So let's take an example of services. If you have a platform through which you're providing, digital services, and again, this is back to the notion that digital is supposed to come in. It has to be effective, productive, but it also has to be cheaper and faster. So if you are digitizing services and making them more expensive than they should be, because there's an aspect of that additional tax that has to be added, that is being imposed on businesses, then the alternative is that everyone will prefer to go with some of those conventional, traditional ways of actually accessing services. And so it's almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot, because the adoption is going to be significantly slowed. So timing is always important. And I think for many of the LDCs, this may not even be the right time to start thinking about imposing any form of digital tax. And I say it because as we come out of the pandemic, as we look to technology and digital tools to support economic recovery and shorten our recovery process, but also help many of the businesses to stay afloat, if then you start to impose taxes, if then you start to impose regulations that make it less conducive to go digital, then I think we're negating the efforts that are being put in place to fast track this digital transformation that we're looking for. So my take is, I think for many of the LDCs, the time is to think about what incentives need to be put in place. And once you've achieved scale of access and affordability, and you've created employment opportunities, and you've sort of figured out what's the best mechanism of providing cost-effective products and services, then at that point you can start to think, is any form of digital tax going to support, be helpful? There's increasing the revenue base, but if you're going to increase the revenue base at the expense of the other, transformation gains that you need to get, then I think that's where we need to, as policymakers, draw that balance. So it's a very, sensitive discussion. I see it happening across different economies, but timing is always critical in terms of when do you impose such forms of taxes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. That was very useful. Minister Chiteme, any views you would like to share?
Thank you very much. Perhaps I could share just a little more on how we can secure financial support for the demographic dividend. Let me begin by restating the importance of harnessing this sector of young people that are growing a lot of growing importance economically and social and others economic areas. You see, if we don't do anything about this group of young citizens, youth, and women, we are going to lose a very important aspect of our development agenda. But through this, it means that we have to find financing for them to go to school, financing for them to get skills, financing for them to get prepared to go into the market. Most of them will go there uneducated and unprepared, without skill, and therefore it is going to affect the productive capacity of a country. I heard one of the speakers was talking about debt, as in how many less developed countries have gone into debt, and a lot of debt that becomes unsustainable. But this is the only way most of these LCDs are going to finance their demographic dividends. This is how they're going to build schools. This is the only way they're going to make sure that they get money to train the unskilled population. This is the only way that they're going to get financing. There are other ways of getting financing, of course. You can have donor support. You have cooperating partners that come to your aid to make sure that they can harness this. But this mostly, in a lot of these countries, is not enough. Therefore, we just need to find a balance on how we are going to finance this demographic dividend and make sure that it speaks to our development agenda and development activities and our priorities, other than saying that we cannot go the date way. We have to find a way we can mix the cooperating partner in terms of donations and donor support, and our own financing in terms of loans and our productive capacities as countries in Sub-Sahara and in the rest of
Africa. Thank you so much, Minister Chiteme. Let me maybe turn now to Professor Borat and then Raymond.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, Chair. So I guess the point I was trying to make is that the idea of going into those markets or developing export markets based on your existing capabilities is precisely why the notion of picking a sector or picking a product is very country specific. And so the idea is, and of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but the idea is try and go to slightly higher value added products based on what you are doing already. Simple example, if you are planting and growing cocoa, right? Go into chocolates, right? So the nearest product from cocoa would be chocolates. You have the capability, you have the raw material. Then the idea is figure out what it is the capability gap is. Do you need skills? Do you need machinery? Is there transport infrastructure? And that's the role of industrial policy, to figure out what those capability gaps are. Is it trade protocols that need to be signed? Once those are lined up in a very specific product based on the initial capability of the country, you then proceed on that basis. The counterfactual is important. It means that if you are producing cocoa, don't try and start an aeronautical industry, right? Go where your capabilities are, and that's the sort of small steps to industrialization story. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Bora. That really clarifies, and definitely fully understood that this is an exercise that each country should actually pursue to really look at, where its competitive advantages, what potential gaps are there, and how to unlock the opportunity that are sitting there, but that may be low-hanging fruits, but that not unfortunately not maybe fully exploited. Raymond, any views on the opportunities to even better leverage the regional integration platform, the Africa Continental Trade Area?
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the other speakers. Just want to add a little bit to what Professor Borat has just mentioned. The question about how you decide where to focus in economic transformation has challenged us for the longest time. And in Africa as well, a lot of the traditional theoretical frameworks we have really don't apply. But there is some new data work that's being done by a Chilean economist called Cesar Hidalgo. And it's something that he calls the economic complexity question, where he uses big data to help to see what the competitive and comparative advantages of various countries and sectors. The website, I think, is oec.world.com. And in that observatory of economic complexity, you could probably try to see some of the how you fit into some of the recommendations that Professor Borat has just mentioned. Okay, where do you go now? Over time, where will your economy be most competitive? What's your resource endowment? And I think those sorts of conversations we should be having before plunging into a lot of the costly and capital-intensive issues. But while I have the floor, I just want to augment a little bit what the Honorable Minister from Rwanda shared as regarding the fiscal side and taxation. The reality is she's absolutely right. But the reality is that most Africans pay indirect taxation that far exceeds anything that the governments would tax them because of the number of non-tariff barriers that they have to face. And so in addition to what she just mentioned, yes, countries should be very judicious as they decide about when to apply a tax, but at the same time, to look at the total picture. If you reduce some of the non-tariff barriers or challenges African consumers have to face, they'll probably be able to afford a tax that is much lower than what they're paying right now, or what they're losing because of business governance issues. And so my point here is a more comprehensive package, and let's not just look at taxation in isolation. Thank you. Over to you, Mansour.
Thank you so much, Raymond. Let me maybe now turn to Minister Kariati and also Dr. Anani for any final thoughts, based on what the conversation that the debates have triggered, any messages that you would like to share. Minister Kaliati.
Thanks so much, moderator, and all my seniors. This is very important where you're engaging these developing countries to highlight a number of factors which are affecting the countries and also the people at large. We'd like to thank UNDP, but also the UN through the Clara Nyangwe, who is also supporting the programs of Malawi government and also the ministry. We are very much focusing on the economic empowerment of women, engagement of the youth, the programs which are putting in place, the entrepreneurship skills, the training programs which we put in place as what one of the Minister of Rwanda said, this is to do with COVID, and we focus very much on technology, which is so paramount in education. But also we are very much on the farmers, smallholder farmers, how we are to empower them. As a government of Malawi, we are really putting a lot of measures to making sure that the Malawian farmers, i.e. women, are so much engaged. We believe in that when being a Minister of Gender perspective, that when we empower women, we've also empowered the nation. And we are going to meet all the 17 sustainable development under UN and also the Sustainable Development Goals on 2063 agenda, which we are very much focusing on. And we have our own also strategic plans as well as Agenda 2063 as Malawi perspective. All these, we are looking forward to see that we work hand in hand with our partners, our donors, and there you are, that you are also supporting government programs. We'd like to thank you very much for honoring Malawi to host this program. Would have seen you in person, but because of the COVID, which the Minister of also Health is making sure that we get rid of these challenges, and we are scaling down with the COVID, make sure that women and youth are moving forward, right, doing business and helping His Excellency developing this nation in one way or another. We promise that we are going to be there, and with the support which you are going to get from the UNDP, the programs which are there, from UN, from World Bank. We are focusing very much on also investing in early childhood development, so that when we educate, we have our programs in the early childhood development, we are going to make sure that boys and girls live longer in schools and make a rightful decision in supporting programs of government. And also the employment programs which we are putting in place as Malawi government, that's focusing on the youth as well to make them busy. But with the COVID, we are scaling down. And shortly, we are going to meet face and face and see how best the donors are programming the programs for the Minister of Gender, Minister of all the ministers whom we have, and also the programs for government. We'd like to thank you, the moderator. We'd like to thank you, our UNDP agreement, and also all those who've been listening to us. May God bless you, and may God remember you in a special way when you are thinking about the least development countries, so that we should be also at par with other countries beyond. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Maybe just quick word from Dr. Anani. I understand he has a small constraint. Any final words before we wrap up?
Okay, thank you very much. I want to say that I was really glad to be part of this session, and I believe that conclusion of this session can help our governments and also help organizations that are working on reduction poverty in Africa to look on what youth needs to show up, what our countries need to grow and reduce inequality of wealth distribution. And I will add to that, in my federation, the federation that I'm working in, we have some trainings programs for youth to empower them, to train them to be the next leadership in their community. And we are also working on advocacy on local and global level to empower this youth, because as you know, and is always said that youth are the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, colleagues. I think we have, unless there are any further questions, we have reached the final stage of this conversation. I have a very last question, which is a bit more technical, which is, should we focus on inequalities or more on inequity? So anybody who wants to share some perspectives on that?
I think I was actually waiting for the good professor to jump in and rescue us, but I think that you do pose quite a very important question, because inequalities are a very broad concept. As I mentioned, they speak to a lot of the various types of differences between groups, and some of which may be organic and others may be imposed. Inequities speak to my mind, to a more systematic and regulatory type of outcome that leads to one group being in a better or more privileged position than another. And when you think about inequity, so when it comes to policy focus, I think inequities are a lot easier to focus on than inequalities, which I think we'll always have in society. There'll always be differences because capacities are different. But maybe we should be. You do pose a great question, and I do look forward to Professor Borat's next book, which will be on inequities.
Yeah, I mean, if I just quickly come in on that, I mean, think of equity as the policy response you require to resolve the problem of inequality. I mean, that's probably the simplest way to think about it. So in the sense that we would like appropriate policies that lift individuals out of poverty, for example, through social protection, better health access, and so on, and you equalize opportunities, right? So that's the state's role. That gives us the platform through which to think about resolving the inequality question, right? And I think that's probably the best way to think about that. Is there a choice between the two? I think both are really, really important. I think it's foregrounded that we, as a society, certainly for my own country, income inequalities are the highest in the world. You cannot have a society that doesn't think about income inequality. At the same time, the reproduction of that income inequality comes from existing inequities across social services and elsewhere. And so it's both of those that are really, really important. I would argue that on a country basis, perhaps income inequalities in least developed countries, this is what we are focused on. Income inequalities are probably less of a concern relative to the concentration of equity, right? So ensuring that we have high levels of equitable access to social services and so on. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Minister, yes, please come in.
Yeah, just quickly to piggyback on what Borat was mentioning, I think it's not either or. And even looking at how the question was framed, I think it's not and yes, inequalities are more exacerbated, and a lot of the policies that you'll see being put in place are more focused on how do we bridge that gap. But I think when you truly look at it, thinking about inclusion, you're talking about fairness and justice. I think it's still at the core of everything, of every policy that needs to be put in place when it's coming in to address aspects of inequality. So I think these are two things that go hand in hand and really complementary, but one leads to the other.
No, thank you so much. I would really agree with that, because I think ultimately the question is about how do you build a strong social contract where the citizens and the state actually can relate to each other. There is trust. So this issue is not one or the other. Definitely, it's both. It's both governance issues. It's also social issues. It's also economic issues. It's really about opportunities. How do you empower each and every citizen and individual to have access to resources and opportunities? So definitely that would be the way forward. Colleagues, now comes the daunting phase of me having to provide a summary of everything that has been said, which of course is not an easy task, but I've just jotted down, I would say maybe 5-6 ideas that kind of speaks to a number of key issues that I've picked. And for me, what we're up to is about how best we reset. We need to think differently. We need to build forward better. Not looking for necessarily, what happened in the past, that's finished, it's over, but really what can we learn? But really looking into future-proof solutions that can really transform. And this transformation, we've been discussing it for so long, and it's not happening. So I think now is the opportunity to maybe take a step back, rethink it, and really address it from a different angle. And that different angle is first probably to invest in areas where value can be maximized. A number of areas have been discussed here. Agriculture. Why? Because there are so many people working in the agriculture sector depending on that. Industries / manufacturing. high value added services. I remember, for instance, in Mauritius, investing in precision mechanics, really something that can be of value. Also looking into nature-based solutions, if needed, from the grassroots, not necessarily from the bottom up, but really solutions that come from the people. They have good solutions, but we need to harvest those and really make good use of it. Investing in innovation, that's the value of, really the currency of development now. Innovation, we need to really invest in that, in capacity, in human capital. And also, how best can we invest in harnessing our natural resources? How do we improve our natural resource management? So I would say that would be the first point in terms of how do you better create and retain value. And here I'm picking back on what Raymond was saying. Second is, the approach also has to be more comprehensive, more integrated. We should look at issues from I would say, from a global perspective and not necessarily from a sectoral perspective. Here we're looking at how to develop solutions that create synergies across sectors, solutions that also come with a clear sequencing. What to do first in the short term, what to work on in the medium term, and really prepare for the future. Third is also to invest in green and inclusive recovery. Inclusive, because what we are up to here is exactly what we're saying. How do we make sure that growth trickles down, that the population actually benefits, from growth? And I think that's an important part. And the second being, the green solutions. How do we make sure that we also leverage, solutions that are friendly to the environment? And here what we are after is more efficiency, more productivity, and really unlocking opportunities that are sitting out there. Fourth is, how do you make sure that you make digital the default? Because that's one key learning from this pandemic. Unless you have proper digital infrastructure that is cost efficient, that is accessible, you're probably losing out opportunities here. Fourth is the pattern of structural transformation, like we were saying. We do not necessarily have to use the same route as what we've seen elsewhere. This transfer, I would say, transfer of labor from the lower productivity to the higher that has necessarily to be manufacturing. But look into really the opportunities that are out there that are country specific. Really look into what would work best, what are the gaps, and how to fill those gaps in terms of capacity. If needed, upskilling or reskilling, in terms of how to better allocate the human capital that is available. 5, I would say, from what we have heard, the key challenge is, how do we create jobs? Unless you create jobs and provide opportunities for more incomes, it will be extremely difficult to address both poverty and inequality. Social protection is important to protect, in the short term, but then you need to graduate from that. At least the social assistance component, you need to graduate from that and move into a more social insurance, component, which of course is warranted if and only if you have a job. And that, I think, is something that's really important. So we're thinking here of, this Lewis model that you were saying, Professor Borat, how do we actually move from, the livelihoods type of job to a more wage, kind of job. And lastly, I think it's more on the governance. The governance for quality public services. Here we're discussing a range of services, including taxation and so on and so forth. So colleagues, I would say that's my takeaway. Probably a bit sketchy, definitely not reflecting everything that we've discussed, but I really wanted to take this opportunity to thank the panel. Really very good insights, very useful, and I trust that these can be very useful to fit into the next outcome document that will inform the program of action for the next decade. Very good insights and inputs from the audience. Thank you so much. Also the interpreters, of course. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to land this discussion. And one thing that we may not forget is that we're using digital technologies to have this conversation, and it's working. That's something we need to flag. This probably would have required all of us to travel to Malawi. We didn't do it, yet we're having a proper conversation. It works. Doesn't mean that we don't want to go to Malawi. We definitely take on the invite of Minister Kaliati to go to Malawi, and we love to. But I think it's also great to recognize that we can leverage, significant results just using and harnessing technology. Also wanted to, of course, to thank the audience and the colleagues that have been working hard all these weeks to make this event happen. So really a big thank to everyone. I'm really happy to have moderated this session and hope I paid justice to the good work that have been put into it. And really look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you so much, and then thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also on behalf of our HRLLS, we are very grateful to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, Mansoor.
Bye-bye.
Good afternoon. I guess we need to start the session. Dr. Kalibata, good to see you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I was busy talking to you and I thought you were hearing me. The whole world was hearing me. I was trying to say hi. So how are you?
Wonderful.
Good.
Very, very good. Thank you for joining us. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my name is Abebe Haile Gabriel, FAO Assistant Director General and Regional Representative for Africa, based in Accra, Ghana, moderator of this session. I wish to welcome you all to this important session and sincerely thank you, particularly the distinguished panelists, for joining us. It's an honor and privilege for FAO to co-host this important session. For obvious reasons, the topic that we will be discussing during this particular session is very strategic and very significant. It's about the nexus between food security, nutrition, agriculture, and economic transformation, but also LDCs and Africa. In a way, this topic is even consequential for the proposed actions discussed in the rest of the other sections. It has meanings for peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, for science, technology, and innovation, for trade and regional integration, for human development, for resilience, and so on. And as we all know, most of the LDCs are actually in Africa. So essentially, the agenda on LDCs is an African agenda. The majority of Africans in these countries live in rural areas, eking their living from agriculture and other rural economic activities. However, the performance of the agriculture and the rural sector has been less than satisfactory. We know that we are lagging behind in terms of progress towards achieving SDGs, notably SDGs on ending poverty and ending hunger, as well as reducing inequality. Africa is also known for its high vulnerability to different kinds of shocks, be it climate, transboundary diseases and pests, conflicts, economic downturns, and so on, with limited capacity to absorb those shocks. So the key to achieving all this is to transform the agriculture and food systems in an inclusive, sustainable, and resilient manner. Success in Africa will have far-reaching positive impacts for the entire world, not just for the Africa region. The session will start with a keynote address, which will set the scene for subsequent interactive discussion. And my colleague, Dr. Maximo Torero Cullen, who is the chief economist of FAO, will give us a keynote address. But we are also joined by high-level panelists representing a cross-section of stakeholders, honorable ministers of member states. I have already talked to Dr. Kalibata, the farmers organization from partners organization, including PAFO and AGRA. I will introduce the panelists later on, but without further ado, let me invite Maximo to give us his presentation. Maximo, over to you.
Dear colleagues, excellencies, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you today to talk about building sustainable, inclusive, and resilient food systems in African LDCs. Let me start by sharing my presentation so that we can go through it. I am going to focus today in 4 core elements. What is the context before and after COVID-19, relevant analytical frameworks, actions and recommendations, and concluding remarks. Let me first start by saying that it's essential that we took a system approach. And please, it's important to understand that these agri-food systems in plural, because every country, every region has its own systems that we need to take into account. But the important thing is that when we look at agriculture, we cannot look at it as a silo. We have to look at it in a comprehensive way, because agriculture affects our natural resources, agriculture affects our environment, and agriculture, of course, brings the benefits and the food security for our human beings and reduces poverty. If we don't look at it as a system approach, we won't be able to measure the trade-offs. Every action we do in agriculture or in any sector will have trade-offs, will have consequences on other sectors. Like, for example, if we intensify production, we could affect our natural resources. If we produce more cattle, we will affect emissions. So we need to find and understand the magnitude of those trade-offs and also of synergies, the positive effects. By understanding those trade-offs, we can assess carefully which are the best policies that will allow us to achieve our goal, which is SDG 2, but also at the same time will allow us to achieve it, minimizing those trade-offs. That's why looking at the agri-food system is so important. Now, what is happening with our system? The agri-food system has not been delivering. Even before COVID-19, hungry and undernourishment people were 690 million in 2019. Stunting among children was an acceptable high. Micronutrient deficiencies harm over 2 billion people. Healthy diets were not affordable for 3 billion people. Obesity was more than 800 million people. Unsafe food affects 1 in 10 people. High food loss and waste, we measure 14% only in losses. Environmental destructions, most of our environmental land, water, and sea and atmosphere are pushed to its limits. And 80% of the rural poverty, of the extreme poverty, are in rural areas, which is where agriculture is the main economic activity. And finally, inequalities has been increasing in more than half of the countries in the world, especially LDCs. What this means that if we don't reduce inequalities, we won't be able to achieve and move out of poverty in a sustainable way. But COVID-19 came and created even a worse situation. The pandemic, only in hunger, our estimates show that it will increase between 83 to 132 million people globally in 2020 due to COVID-19. This will affect, of course, LDC countries, which will pay the largest toll. And it's because lack of access to agricultural inputs, it will affect our labor supply. We know that 1.2 billion people work directly in agriculture, which means 4 billion people working in agriculture at the end of the line. And 30% of those has been affected because of COVID-19. And the commodity market has been impacted, not only directly, we have seen volatility in food prices of staples, but also indirectly because of the economic recession that will reduce the demand of our high-value commodities coming from the LDC region. Not only that, if we focus on nutritional outcomes, in addition to other issues like education, for example, but just focusing on nutrition, which is at the core of our mandate, childhood stunting will increase in 2.6 million chronically malnourished children by 2022. It's the first time that we change the trend again back. We reverse the decreasing curve for the first time in 3 decades. Childhood wasting, 6.7 million additional children under 5 could suffer from wasting. 10,000 additional child deaths per month. And childhood obesity means that childhood will worsen. Obesity will worsen due to negative impact on diet and physical activity. So obesity, of course, is associated with higher livability. Now, why is this so important when we talk about the value chain development? Because if we have, in the case of the least developed countries, we have 22% prevalence of undernourishment in sub-Saharan Africa, 235 million people undernourished in sub-Saharan Africa in 2019, 430 million region, the only region in the world where the number of extreme poor has increased. And we have lost, because of COVID-19, more than a decade. And 70 to 80% depend on agriculture and renewable natural resources for their livelihoods. So agriculture and rural areas and the rural transformation is central to be able to achieve what we are trying to achieve, to be able to transform our agri-food system. Now, FAO, because of COVID-19, created a recovery response plan. This recovery comprehensive plan is designed to proactively and sustainably address socioeconomic impacts of the pandemic in line with the UN approach to Build Back Better. And in pursuit of a sustainable development goals, it aims to mitigate the immediate impacts of the pandemic while strengthening the long-term resilience of food systems and livelihoods. Our plan, which tries to take the opportunity of the COVID-19, has 7 priority areas. Global humanitarian response plan. Data for decision-making is crucial to have state-of-the-art data, real-time data to know where to target and where to do interventions. Economic inclusion and social protection to reduce poverty. We have to scale up our social protection program to help the most vulnerable and the most affected right now by COVID-19. Trade and food safety standards, which are essential to allow the flow and the movement of goods from countries that have surpluses to countries that need. Boosting the smallholder resilience for recovery. So it's not only being prepared for the shocks, but also know how to handle the shocks. Preventing the next zoonotic pandemic, and the food system transformation. These are the core 7 priority areas we are trying to work so that we can help in this Building Back Better. Now, the challenge on African LDCs for food systems because of COVID-19 is that the situation is exacerbated. We will see more acute food insecurity. We will see more situations of international community affected. We will see the presence of more extreme weather conditions because of climate change, more insecurity and more conflict. And we know from our previous work from the SOFI 2017, 2018, that both conflict and extreme weather conditions, as well as economic slowdowns and downturns, increase substantially the level of undernourishment. So it's not just COVID-19, we have to put in the context of the situation that we were already facing but COVID-19 has exacerbated that situation. At the same time, there are big challenges of the food systems in the African least developed countries. First, we have a rapid growth in incomes and urbanization, the transforming African food systems and giving rise to new opportunities along the value chain, but also creating this amount of labor force of youth, which if we don't find ways to create jobs and attract that labor supply with new jobs on the labor demand side in the rural areas, we will have significant levels of unemployment. We need to upgrade physical and social infrastructure. That's the only way we can boost future capacity to create wealth. We need to bolster vulnerable groups, and that's where social protection, which Africa used to be the continent with the less level of preparedness in terms of social protection programs, in difference, for example, to Latin America. We need to boost that. We need to create institutionality so that we can support the most vulnerable, but at the same way, finding transitions, moving out of them to a more sustainable growth and development. And we need better data to understand where are the problems, where is exclusion, where are the vulnerabilities. That's why we are putting a huge effort in increasing our FIES, food insecurity scale, experience scale, so that we can collect real-time data and see where people are in the worst situations of hunger. And that will help us and benefit growth, but growth with inclusion, our share equality, which is our major goal too. Now, which are the major relevant analytical frameworks that we have been focusing? The first relevant is resilience. One of the things that we learned from COVID-19 is that we need to work on resilience. And this implies two things. One is we need to be ready to understand when the shocks will occur. And remember, uncertainty, we don't know the potential effects like in COVID-19. And for that, we need very early warning tools that have predictive power. We need to look into One Health approach. We need to have insurance tools. But the second is how to cope once the shocks occur. And for that, we need to have the overarching goal of a framework for tangible collective outcomes that brings together all involved actors. In the short term, we need to anticipate and respond and recover from imminent or current shocks and disasters. But in the long term, we need to assure that we can secure development, medium-term outcomes, and long-term development. So not only be prepared for the shock and know and have early warning systems, but also find ways in which we can cope better with those shocks. That is what resilience will mean at the end of the line. Now, inclusivity is central. And for inclusivity, we need to have access to technology. We need to have access to financial services, a major constraint of the LDCs. We need to have access to other income sources. Land, we need to have property rights of land. Access to markets, access to agricultural training and information. And today we know technology is playing a crucial role. That's the only way we'll be inclusive. But there are two other elements that we need to bring up, which are access to education, access to human capital so that it's ready and we can have the match between the labor supply and the labor demand, but also access to infrastructure. Those are central, and we need to bring both together. If not, we are not going to achieve this inclusion and growth this inclusion. We know that the improvement in access to education and improving access to infrastructure will reduce inequalities, and that's what we are aiming in this process. What are our recommendations and actions? First, we need to think on an inclusive process, and that requires also to look at governance and institutionality and human capital. We need to look at national to local. Is every country, every part of the country, even within a country, have differences, and we need to be context specific. Of course, there are policies that we can generalize, but we need also to contextualize them. We need to target and tailor the marginalized populations, and we need to help them and give them opportunities. We need to have early detection, identify the needs of marginalized people early on, and give them the voice in research and policy and program design. And finally, we need recognition, recognize the contributions that excluded people already make to food systems with their time, labor, through policies that empower them to secure more equal benefits. We have developed a program called Ag Invest Initiative, which is a success story on our side. Why? Because we look at value chains, we look at the contribution of the value chains, we identify bottlenecks, and we try to resolve the problems and link to the financial system. This is a core program within the Hand in Hand initiative, which is also looking at how to target and prioritize locations within the territory. So we are looking at areas where there is agricultural potential and where we can make a difference through Agri-Invest and through other initiatives that will resolve and bring the private sector to resolve the bottlenecks and try to find solutions so that we can link these areas where there is a lot of poverty, but significant potential. The idea here is also to find sustainable value chain development, and that means return to asset to owners, wage and incomes, thinking on reducing exclusion, benefit to consumers, tax revenues for the countries, and impact over environment. That's the only way we will have sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. Remember again, the food system approach brings the trade-offs, and sustainability has these three elements: economic, social, and environmental. If we don't bring the three, we are not being sustainable. And for that, we need to understand the trade-offs and the synergies so that we can optimize them. Now, also it's important to look at a broad array of infrastructure investments, as I mentioned before, along the entire value chain, especially target to nutritious food, because that's a challenge. We want people to have access to healthy diets. And here is where reduction of losses and waste plays a crucial importance. We need to improve storage. We need to bring technologies to handle and storage and processing. We need to bring market infrastructure, not only roads and electricity, for sure, but we also need to bring value chain infrastructure. And we also link to improve the processing technology, invest in agricultural production and in the standards. For example, let me give you what we are doing right now together with Rabobank and the World Bank. We are trying to identify, in this case, we are showing Kenya, using all the geospatial information we have collected in our hand-in-hand geospatial platform, where the locations in Kenya where a cooling storage facility will create the biggest impact. Why? Because we know what is being produced, where are the farmers, we know where is the connectivity, where is the roads, where is the internet access, where is the energy. And that allows us to create a network of mobile storage facilities, cooling storage facilities, and we can centralize them and bring the commodities. This will give the farmers more resilience because they will be able to store and extend the length of their produce shelf life for a period longer than the short term, which allows them to better cope with price volatility and with risk. This project is aiming to identify exact locations, the red points here and the blue points, where these storage facilities can be, but we are also linking the storage facilities to warehouse receipt systems, but with an innovation. It's not the traditional one for staples. Here we want to link them through electronic tickets, which are linked to the financial system. So we are bringing several solutions in one. Extend the length of the storage of the shelf life of the produce, giving them more resilience and capacity to get better profits from the produce. Reduce losses because these are high value commodities and now they can be stored in cooling facilities. Access to markets because this e-commerce platform through the warehouse platform can create better access to markets, and also access to finance because the electronic tickets from the warehouse can be given in guarantee to get liquidity for the farmers for the next season. That is how we need to think. We need to think on a comprehensive approach that resolves the problems of the farmers they are facing. We also need to put policies and public investment in infrastructure, which are critical to address, for example, because of the climate change, climate-proof infrastructure solutions, repair damaged infrastructure for climate-related disasters, repair damaged infrastructure for conflict, and infrastructure investment in conflict areas. That's where we need support to be able to build this, but again, take the opportunity to build back better. Resolve for once and for all structural problems that we have, like the lack of cooling storage facilities or accessibility to markets. Let me conclude by saying the following. Food system policies can be tailored to both address the challenges and seize new opportunities. Ensuring inclusive capacity building for vulnerable groups to benefit from innovations such as healthy value chains and information and communications technology revolution are central. We know digital technologies can do a difference, but they are just a mean. We need to have all the elements behind: content, capability, and connectivity. If we don't have those elements, then digital technologies won't do the work. Territorial approaches such as agro-industrial parks and our hand-in-hand approach can bring and prioritize actions to become cost-effective and can allow us to target and identify bottlenecks and do investment plans to attract the private sector and to work with the governments to blend or to facilitate that process. Policymakers and program designers can similarly ensure that excluded people are represented in all stages of the policy intervention, design and implementation, and evaluation, as well as the decision-making of institutions. That's why in our new strategic framework, we believe that it's not only data, innovation, and technology, but also what we call complements: governance, institutionality, and human capital development. If we continue to pioneer new ideas, we can decide the food systems that can consider the different trade-offs to build back better. The trade-offs need to be understood so that we can make the proper decisions to resolve our problems. Thank you very much for your time. And again, I am sorry I couldn't be with you today, but it has been a pleasure to be able to do these introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Maximo, for that very comprehensive presentation. I'm sure a copy of the presentation will be made available to participants. It has been very broad presentation covering a lot of areas. What Maximo was sharing with us is like right from outlining the major challenges that LDCs in Africa are facing towards identifying areas for action. And now when we move towards the panel, I'm sure we'll be able to hear experiences from countries, from partners on how these are actually taking place on the ground. It is an honor for me to now to introduce the distinguished panelists. As I said at the beginning, we are joined by honorable ministers of member states, development partners, and also from farmers' organization. We have amongst us, Honorable Vincent Bamulangaki Semjija, the Minister of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, the Republic of Uganda. We also have amongst us Honorable Lobin Lowe, who is the Minister of Agriculture of the Republic of Malawi. We also have amongst us His Excellency Ato Umar Hussein, the Minister of Agriculture of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. And we also have Ms. Sarah Mbago Bunu, who is the Director of IFAD for East and Southern Africa Division. We also have Ms. Elizabeth Nsimadala, the President of the Pan-African Farmers Organization, PAFO. And last but not least, we have Dr. Agnes Kalibata, who is the President of AGRA, as we know her, as well as the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy to the 2021 Food Systems Summit. So you will expect that this is going to be a very engaging, high-level, interactive discussion. Let me start from Honorable Minister of Uganda, Honorable Vincent Bamulangaki Semjija, to just kick off the discussion. Now,
hello?
Can you hear me? Let me ask you one question. Can you hear me, Honorable Minister?
I'm getting you clearly, but I don't know whether you are.
Very good. I want to ask a question. We know the focus is, creating and maintaining inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems. This is the focus. And from the presentation made by my colleague Maximo, we need to look at it in a systemic perspective, in an inclusive manner. We know that there are so many actors and stakeholders along the whole value chain. On the other hand, we have all ministers here, ministers of agriculture, whether it includes animal industry, fisheries, still in the broader sense of the term. How are you addressing this multi-sectoral nature of the issue? Because Maximo was talking about infrastructure, for example. Without addressing the issues of infrastructure, then we can't achieve the food and agriculture systems transformation. So what are the top issues that in your country you are addressing to create and maintain inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems? Let's start from the Honorable Minister of Uganda, and then I will ask more or less the same question to the Honorable Minister of Malawi. Honorable Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much, moderator, my brother. I want to greet our brothers and sisters listening in, but also allow me to salute Your Excellency, the honorable ministers, and everybody who has really contributed to this very wonderful session. I want to thank you very much for including, for the organizers for including Uganda today. And I want to say that our previous speaker has given us a very good insight of what we want to talk about. For this country, Uganda, as you know, we want to achieve our vision 2040 of a transformed Ugandan society from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country by 2040. We are tackling many areas, but agriculture is a priority, has been taken as a major priority area to transform our country to a modern society. To answer the question straight, we are looking at a multifaceted program where many stakeholders, especially the sectors that are concerned with infrastructure, especially the Ministry of Work, Housing and Urban Development, the Ministry of Water and Environment, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Those are the major sectors. The Ministry of Education, and of course the Ministry of Security. All of these work together to make sure that our people are served, and we answer the question of inclusiveness, which is a very big question. Inclusivity, of course, to me and to others, inclusiveness, fairness, gender sensitivity, balanced development, food and nutritional security for all are very important aspects if we want to talk about and also eradicate inequalities. So we have started a program approach in this country as opposed to sector planning systems that we have always been following. That means that all these sectors must work together to make sure that we improve on the farm access roads, We access our farmers with the water for production. We access our farmers with mechanization and using, we help our women and the youth to get involved in agriculture, to be interested in agriculture by mechanizing agriculture. And we have a whole program for agro-industrialization headed by the Ministry of Agriculture. It has all the sectors, about 15 sectors that are working together, because we are following a program approach instead of small plans by sector, instead of the disjointed planning that we have been following all along. Now it is working together as sectors to make sure that the goals of agro-industrialization, the goals of nutrition and food security are approached and achieved together. So that is how we are approaching the whole question.
Thank you so much, Honorable. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my brother.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'm sincerely grateful to be with you again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I remember last time we met was in Uganda. And thank you for your commitment and leadership. A very, very rich feedback, because this issue.
Thank you very much. I want to assure my brothers and sisters who are listening in, who are part of this chat, this debate, that we, even during this COVID-19, during this problem of COVID-19, Uganda has had food surplus. We have enough food to feed our people. We are also, and we are also feeding our neighbors, the region. So this is something that cannot be underestimated. But the whole thing is following a program approach where everybody is together. Infrastructure, the roads, the Ministry of Works must implement projects that are aimed at getting access to the farmers. Farmers must access the markets, and health must be there to make sure that our farmers are healthy. We are implementing a very important project called the Uganda Multisectoral Food Security and Nutrition Project. All of these sectors are playing a part. This is Ministry of Health, Ministry of Local Government, Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Agriculture is the leading, and the animal industry is the leading sector. So we following such approach, we are now achieving together. It's no longer pointing fingers to one sector or the other. We are losing together and succeeding together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I come back again on the surplus production. I must congratulate you for that in relation to the AFCFTA and the opportunities that there are. But let me now invite Honorable Lobin Lowy, the Minister from Malawi. Honorable Minister, if you have heard the questions that I've asked the Honorable Minister of Uganda, I want to ask you also to give us, to share experiences from Malawi on how you are addressing this this issue of inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems in Malawi. Over to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much, moderator, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Agriculture still remains the main source of livelihoods for a large sector or section of our population in the LDCs. As such, any production shocks negatively impact on food security and nutrition status of an already very vulnerable population. The present COVID-19 pandemic has actually revealed how fragile our food systems are, calling for a serious reflection by all stakeholders. And if you ask top issues that my country is addressing, I would start with agriculture research and extension. These are very critical, and as a country, they are one of the priorities, and we are investing a lot into this. Another issue is to improve efficiency of agricultural output and input markets. Third issue is irrigation development. Malawi actually relies very much on lake-fed agriculture, but we are going with some reforms So we are now investing a lot in irrigation. We have massive projects. You may wish to know that part of the section of Malawi, that is Lower Shire, each year is affected by drought. So what we have done is to invest a lot into irrigation. We have come up with a Shire Valley Transformation Project. We are creating, or we are constructing a big canal which will cover over 40 kilometers. And farmers along that canal will not rely on rain-fed anymore. And this is a great achievement for the country. Another issue is infrastructure development for inputs and output market. You may wish to know that we have a grain marketer, which is public. It almost collapsed. And what we have done is to make sure that we revamp this market, grain marketer. And as I'm talking, it will be a control, because all along, private traders will control the market, and it was to the advantage of, to disadvantage of farmers. But with this grain marketer, we are trying to empower it, that is financially and with some infrastructure. So farmers will benefit because it will start purchasing the produce as early as possible, compared to what we have experienced for some time. And when you talk of food surplus, you may wish to know that as a country, we have a program, the Affordable Inputs Program. My country invested a lot in this program, and we actually targeted the staple food, which is maize. And you may wish to know that we targeted almost all farming families, and we have covered 91% of them, and we have surplus. And I would like the region to know Malawi has a lot of maize, and we are ready to export to any country where there is demand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for sharing very rich experiences from Malawi. Again, very happy to hear that Malawi is also having surpluses in maize. This is what we want to achieve as a region, as in Africa, and also to transform the product itself. You know, instead of looking for exporting maize as raw maize, we could process it, add value, and then benefit all the stakeholders along it. I'm sure Malawi is considering this. We will come back to these kind of very important issues, but then let's also hear from another Honorable Minister, His Excellency Umar Hussein, the Minister of Agriculture from Ethiopia. You are most welcome, Your Excellency, and we're very happy that you have joined us. You have heard the interventions from the Honorable Ministers of Uganda and Malawi. You can add the experiences from Ethiopia, but also I want you to share with us a little bit additional perspective. Now, the Honorable Ministers touched on how they empower farmers also. We know that the food value chain involves a lot of stakeholders, you know, along the farm to fork spectrum, including even consumers. And so how can these stakeholders, who sometimes have differing or even competing points of view, how can they contribute to solutions? Government has its own strategy, investments, and so on, but there are important stakeholders. I mean, the farmers. I will, of course, ask later on the president of the Pan-African Farmers Forum, but how are you working with the different stakeholders towards coming up with a solution to which everybody can commit and contribute? Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Abebe, the moderator of today's program. I'm also pleased to be a part of this discussion in which most of our African country, come up with the solution for our problems, and then we learn from each other a lot. Thank you so much, and I get a lot of points from the previous speakers, as you mentioned. As you all know, this year, the eastern part, likely from the continent, has been affected by a lot of challenge, maybe different from the other. Locusts and the flood are, on top of, our problem, which we have in hand, like COVID pandemic, which is common for all of us. However, having this whole problem still, as mentioned by honorable ministers, there is also positive growth in Ethiopia also from agriculture side. We didn't expect that even a lot of effort has been made to maintain that positive growth in agriculture. Specifically, the newly strategic policy intervention from our side is devised, which is highly focusing on, devising a business model for agriculture. As you all know, agriculture is one of the key areas of the economic contribution in our country, and it's also a source of employment. In that regard, the first thing the government did in the policy redesigning was looking to the public-private partnership. As you all know, most of our agricultural activity is undertaken by smallholder farmers, which accounts more than 80%, as everybody know. But having the land, enough land in the water in the lowland area, we try to introduce the public-private partnership and encourage the private sector in precision agriculture, smart farming, which includes even urban agriculture, newly introduced in the last 2 years, agri-product marketing and agri-financing. Most likely in the financing, currently Ethiopian government come up with a new approach in which the farmers can get access to finance without fixed asset collateral. Even the movable assets can be taken as a collateral for the farmers. They can have their crops or live animal and the land certificate for the loan that they get from the banks. These are some of the areas in which we are highly engaged. As mentioned earlier by my colleague, agro-mechanization is also one of the focus area because here in Ethiopia and maybe which will hold for the other African country too, the major part of agricultural problem is the production side. If we want to increase the production side, which is accompanied by the post-harvest laws, to address those problems, we need to mechanize, modernize our agriculture. That's an area where our government getting focus, and for any item which used for the production of agriculture, get a tax holiday in the country, which includes around 515 items, very big items list, from highly mechanized to the small level of machineries. Agricultural financial inclusion is also one of the issues which I mentioned earlier. The other one is the cluster farming. As you all know, I don't know the other part of Africa very well, but in our case, the average land holding goes to even less than a hectare in some part of the country. In that case, we can't come up with the productivity level or production level of that we need. So we introduced through Agricultural Transformation Agency the cluster approach, in which the farmers comes together and they bring the land together, which is adjacent to each other, and introduce the whole extension service, introduction of technology. No one left behind in that area. That took around 25 to 30% of our farms these days, because every year we are, in one season, we can have around 13 to 14 million hectare under production. But out of that, around 30% will be covered by this cluster approach. We introduced a program-based cluster so that, we don't have a mix of production in that area, focusing on the major crops. The other one is the introduction of, agro-industrial park, which may be held in the other part of the country, the other countries also. This is also an area in which we intervene to solve the problem of this fragmented market approach, in which there is a long chain of markets, which does not really benefit the farmers automatically. The other one is the diversification in production. Mostly we focus on very few food groups or crops. We try to diversify this one also based on, the comparative advantage the country have. I believe whenever we talk about sustainability, no agricultural sustainability without environment. That's why Ethiopian government focus on, tree planting every year, which is in billion, and agriculture would take that initiative together with the Environment Commission, so that we can have a good environment for our future. In general, we need to think about the whole value chain whenever we talk about agriculture. In our case, we try to see the production side, which need focus, so that we can feed our, population, which is maybe a very big number, more than 100 million surpassed these days, and the market value chain in which we are highly inefficient. This includes as mentioned by the first speaker, the construction of the, infrastructure, which is very poor these days. We introduce also the data management system, in which the extension workers, which is more than 17,000 at the village level, can access the data so that they can easily pass the data using the tablet to the central database. Finally, back to your final question, the stakeholders' role. By the way, in our case, we try to create a seamless approach among the ministries. There is no such, binding rule in the conflicting interests unless, everybody look for common personal interest. In our case, we don't have much problem to integrate, but as far as the agriculture sector is concerned, including the policy, we try to, cooperate with the other ministries, starting from the one who is allocating the budget with good reason, up to the private sector, as well as the scholars who has a good contribution in this sector. So that way we are trying to coordinate. As far as agriculture sector is concerned, it's me as a ministry who is coordinating this sector. But as mentioned earlier by my colleague from Ghana, it's a program approach. We have a platform in which we meet. For instance, for export, we have a platform. For cluster, which I mentioned earlier, we have a platform. Again, as far as the mechanization is concerned, we have the same platform in which we can meet and discuss. That way we are trying to manage. That does not mean, everything is done well, but there are a lot of challenges. As you know, agriculture is highly risky business. And the post-harvest loss is one of the challenge, which maybe holds in the other part of the country. Thank you so much. These are some of the points I want to make. If there is any question, I will be back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for this very rich contribution of experience sharing. I know if we had time to give similar opportunities to other honorable ministers from other countries, they will be very glad to share their experiences, which is very, very rich, which leads me to another initiative that the Director General of FAO has introduced and actually has offered, and that is to promote commodities, and from each country, the commodity they believe is so strategic and that they are doing well. FAO can help them to promote that commodity globally using FAO's platform. So these are some of the examples. It's rich, I'm so happy to hear experiences from our member states. Now, you talked about financial inclusion from the Ethiopian experience, and I want to relate to the next panelist, my colleague Sarah Mbangobuhu, who is from IFAD. She's director of East and Southern Africa Division. Now we know IFAD, it's a UN agency. We work together, but also IFAD is, international financial institution. It works with other international financial institutions, private sector, with member states, and so on. Sarah, you have heard very interesting stories from the honorable ministers, in the countries. We know these are not the only ones. So how can you tell us if there are success stories in agri-food systems from your perspective? Sarah, over to you.
What a challenging and very important question. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers of Agriculture, distinguished panelists, UN Special Envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit, Dr. Karibata. And thank you, Dr. Bebe, our sister agency, FAO. You really give me a challenging question to talk about successes and the partnerships. And to try and link this to the very first presentation we heard around the current food situation that is facing us. And having heard from the Honorable Ministers, all of whom are distinguished partners of IFAD, and we work agenda and visions. And fortunately, I can safely say that there are a number of successes. Already, the Honorable Minister from Uganda has talked about how multi-sector programming, and even the Minister from Ethiopia, is building results. For instance, IFAD is supporting the whole platform for water efficiency discussion and use, looking at the water scarcity, a challenge that is facing Ethiopia, and even stimulating the South-South types of exchanges for learning, and working closely with FAO as well on this transfer of knowledge agenda, where we have gone with the participants, stakeholders from Ethiopia to Kenya, and Kenyans have gone back to Ethiopia to really exchange on how water is governed, what water policies are being used, and then trying to roll out a blueprint around water and the importance of using groundwater, green water, blue water more efficiently to really boost productivity and reduce dependency on rainwater. It's just one of those, one of those exciting things that we're seeing coming out of the engagements that we have, not only with the Rome-based agencies, but with other important actors. And before I get really into some of those things that really need to change and some of the solutions that we have found, I really do want to emphasize just some of the points that have already been raised. around, the food system being the entire value chain. And it's really also around what it can deliver in terms of sustainable jobs, in terms of sustainable production in the ecosystem, in terms of resilience, in terms of improved nutrition. I think this is why the UN is here, and we see so much opportunities in Africa to be able to stimulate and advance that agenda for equitable livelihoods, for the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, and for a joint prosperity and actually a wider sustainability, looking at the One Health, One Planet agenda. So I think this is important. Now, that said, I think we are faced with a huge challenge, and I think it was raised by the Honorable Minister from Ethiopia. And the fact is that the resources for this transformation agenda are limited, and particularly in the face of COVID, we see fiscal distress for many countries. I think the ministers are here, they're engaging the ministers of finance. They need to crowd in enough resources to build resilience for an adaptation to the climate crisis. Also dealing with COVID has been commendable. I really think these efforts have been commendable so far, and I think some of the examples towards that demonstrated in a bid to try and crowd in more development finance. I think what I would recommend and what we see is that, yes, the use of land use and really looking at new land use patterns and tenures can really hold and improve security. We have seen how this transformation is really helpful in Senegal. We have seen how land tenure systems really promote security and promote investment for farmers in Ghana, and also in parts of Uganda and Kenya. So we're saying that part is also very important in terms of when we talk about climate. It's not only about small irrigation or relevant irrigation schemes to reduce dependency on rainfed, but it's also around those governance systems that can move the field. We also know that when we improve our farming practices, for instance, if we introduce no-till agriculture for those smallholders who are already commercial, and better targeting of fertilizer application, we know this contributes to the fight against global warming. And there we have very good examples coming from Southern Africa, from the Botswanas, from South Africa itself, from your Namibias, where these approaches have been adopted successfully, and they're reducing carbon pollution by up to 18%. Having said that, in other countries where there is maybe less access to finance, and I'll get to talking a little bit about that, the use, for instance, of nitrogen fixing commodities, helping and improving soil quality and adding nutrients to farmland, just through simple technologies where agriculture extension works. So for instance, in Ethiopia, with Agriculture Transformation Agency, we have seen enormous benefits of those systems. In Zambia today, we've digitized, as the minister talked about, and we're trying to send together with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Livestock, two separate ministries, the introduction of specific technical messages around animal husbandry, around crop management for management of disease. And with World Food Programme, we're also introducing tools for livestock index insurance, just to build on the resilience that the resilience question, the management of risk raised by the Honorable Minister from Malawi. So we are seeing quite a lot of good things when we talk about you making the best use of the climate finance that is there. We can really get a lot. And I want to also just say that one unfortunate thing is we have had quite a lot of research on the African continent, R&D on new technologies. Unfortunately, it's been crowded around maize, and the minister from Malawi talked about maize, but there's vast opportunities to boost the research budget. And I use this forum to really implore that, so that we can have more nutrient-dense crops being introduced. We've had success in the yellow flash potato that is really emerging, some cassava variants which are, bio enriched, that are giving ground in DRC and places where nutrition gains are really struggling, but we need more crowding in there. Right now, only 2% of climate finance is for adaptation that gets into the hands of smallholder farmers. And I think this is too little. So these forums and others should be platforms for advocating. And also, as we have the ministers here, I know there is a fiscal pressure, but how can we reduce the resources that we spend on food imports and divert those funds really to agricultural transformation agenda and the support of rural zones in particular. Now, my second point, and I have a final third point that I want to use to stress here, the successes, we see that many smallholder farmers in rural areas are very marginalized. They're not incentivized to increase productivity. And I think all the ministers have mentioned that. But we have seen where we are introducing instruments like a payment for ecosystem services, because today we only recognize the role that smallholders farmers play in the production of food, that we don't recognize or even reward them for essential environmental services they provide. So for instance, pollination, pest control, regulation of soil fertility, carbon sequestration, erosion control, water management, all of these are really services that smallholder farmers are playing. We should try and incentivize them and also provide pricing for their outputs, which creates win-win, and really say you're part of the solution in terms of feeding the current and future generations. We also need to ensure that they are able to have secure markets. So how can we open up these urban markets? I think you mentioned, Dr. Webe, the opportunities of the Africa Free Trade Continental Area. I think there's lots there that could happen. We've also talked about the need to reform our marketing and distribution systems. There's studies that show, run by FAO, that the price of food in our growing urban areas is so much higher because of inefficiencies in these open traditional markets that we value so much. We need to invest there, upgrade them so that they can be accessible to all and reduce costs in the logistics. And linked to this is also changing the blueprint of how we govern food markets. I allude to this because really many of those open markets are governed by local authorities. They don't reinvest in those systems. At times they divert resources to other important needs, I understand. But even how we issue our import licenses and so on, if we can create new rules of the game and use the rebuilding back from COVID better, that would be excellent. And let's say my last final big cohort around success stories, the Minister of Ethiopia also mentioned this, and I think as well from Malawi, the backbone of agriculture food systems in most of Africa are the agri-SMEs. And here there is huge unmet demand for credit and finance. There's 3 or 4 things that spring out. The finance, if it's there, it's highly unaffordable. The gap for the types of financial services is largely a 100 billion annually is required. This is huge, and 100 million for smallholder farmers. This, without access to finance, they cannot adopt the technologies that are out there. They will not be able to make the necessary investments to transform agriculture. So there are solutions there. We see now, the fintech hub in East Africa, in Kenya, offers fantastic opportunities. We see mobile money coming in and reducing the cost of actually providing essential financial offerings to the agri-SMEs. We have de-risking guarantee schemes with financial banks and financial institutions. The minister mentioned financial inclusion programs in Ethiopia, really working with SACCOs and other rural entities to get the resources out there. I think data is a very important part of this piece, but also bringing different stakeholders to be able to really ensure that the agri-SMEs that are providing transport services, storage services, warehousing services, even education and extension services in some instances, are really able to get the cash flow or the capital resources to really invest and adopt new technologies. Really, this is very key, and digital is part of the rural transformation. If you put digital at the heart together with people, young people driving it, I think this is where we can see changes. And we see changes in the urban agricultural space across Tanzania, across Rwanda. We really see the emergence of a new type of commercial actor who's willing and able to produce sustainably. I think those are some of the wins that we see. So how can we build on these experiences and make sure that they're widely shared? I perhaps stop there, Abebe, and pass the floor over to you. But I think really there's a couple of key points that we need to take on board, and I'm so excited to be here with our esteemed ministers who talk to us all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Has been quite mouthful, actually. You have given us a lot of information from policy to governance to investment to some specific examples. Thank you so much. But at some point, when I hear you, I thought I was hearing from a farmer. The way you made a very strong advocacy on behalf of, provision of incentives. You used the example of payment for ecosystem services, but the whole of incentives. Why should, whether it is a farmer or an investor or an innovator or even a policymaker like the Minister of Finance, why should they invest in agriculture? How do we convince them? It's not like a charity. It's an important economic activity. And when they make an investment, it's a commitment. They must get some benefit out of it. And that is how I think I understood it, which really serves as a bridge now to go to the next distinguished panelist. I had considered initially to give Miss Elizabeth Nsimadala, who is the president of the Pan-African Farmers Organization, to actually to give her the chance to speak first before even the honorable ministers and Sarah spoke, to try to see what the demand side of the story would look like before we talk about what is on the offer. But then finally I said to myself, no, I think farmers, of course, we're talking on their behalf, the whole of it. Honorable ministers, they emphasized that unless we produce, the rest of it is really meaningless. We have to produce enough, of course, along the whole value chain. But then without the farmers, and in a broader sense, the farmers also, whenever we're talking about investments, they are key stakeholders. So I want Ms. Elizabeth to listen to the perspectives from the policymakers, the honorable ministers, the partners, and then make reflection on the basis of that. So Ms. Elizabeth, I would like to ask you, of course, you are free to kind of reflect on the basis of what you have heard so far, but you have now two caps. One, you are representing farmers organization, and so you are like a voice of the farmers organization. Do you feel that your voice, you have an articulate voice, a voice that needs to be heard? Do you think that your voice is represented? And if not, what do you think should be done? Secondly, again, as president of PAFO, what are you doing? What towards the solution? What are the key areas of the focus of PAFO and its network organizations towards contributing to the solution as an important stakeholder? Over to you, Ms. Elizabeth Nsimadala.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Baby, but my connection is a bit weak. So I'll request that I unmute the video. At least I have a profile picture that can be displayed on the screen.
Okay, that will be fine.
So distinguished excellencies, honorable ministers, our UN Special Envoy, Dr. Agnes, and other fellow participants. I want to appreciate FAO for really giving us this opportunity, and I feel the discussions that we are having today, especially on the food systems in low and middle income countries, are very timely, because we all know that the low and middle income countries are experiencing a radical transition in response to socioeconomic and demographic challenges. People are very conscious now of nutrition. And if we are talking of food systems, then there is no way we can leave out farmers. We are important stakeholders when it comes to such discussions. I want to appreciate the previous speakers, the honorable ministers, Dr. Sarah. I think you made a comment that Sarah looked like she was speaking on behalf of the farmers. And I want to reassure you that from the farmers' perspective, we really regard UN agencies, FAO, IFAD as co-partners, because you've made us who we are. Nobody was able to listen to us, but today we also sit around tables and make sure that our voices are heard. And this is because of the support that we are getting from institutions like FAO, from IFAD, because we really walk with you the journey, for example, for IFAD when they are transforming rural lives. You cannot talk of transforming rural lives unless you've given priority to the farmers. So back to the question on whether we feel our voice is represented. As a continental platform, I think our role was first to justify our relevancy as key actors in the agricultural transformation. And it is the reason we mobilized ourselves to make sure that we have one common voice that can knock on doors of every actors and stakeholders in the agriculture sector and be heard the way you're listening to us today. And we did this by mobilizing ourselves. As we speak, we represent over 80 million smallholder farmers in 49 countries. We've built partnerships with development partners, FAO, IFAD, and others. We've built partnerships with governments, listening from the ministers that have just spoke. For example, moving to Ethiopia, we have a strong Oromia Coffee Cooperative Union as our member. Moving to Malawi, we have NASFAM, that is a member of SACAO, our regional farmers organization. To Uganda, we have New Cafe, we have UCA, we have the Uganda National Farmers Federation as our members. Meaning we have strong voices down there, and we've tried to really build the capacity of the continental farmers platform, the regional farmers platform, but also the national level farmers platforms to be able to dialogue with different actors, with governments at different levels, be it at national, regional, and also at continental level. But also now moving back to the representation, our voice, yes, we are represented, but is it effective enough to make the change that we want in the agriculture sector? I think that is what is very critical. And this is why we are now calling on a multi-stakeholder approach of how we can really together build an ecosystem where we can all contribute and leverage on each other's opportunities, but also learn from others' weaknesses and be able to walk the journey together in terms of transforming the agriculture sector in Africa and across, but also transforming our food systems. So what is the solution? What do we have in our dockets? What are we working on in terms of our focus? At continental level and at regional level, because our strategic direction now is geared towards economic services. And by economic services, we are looking at trying to empower ourselves as farmers to be key actors across the entire value chain. And we are doing that by strengthening, again, the capacity of our membership. We are doing that by focusing on a value chain approach where we identify priority and profitable value chains and we focus on them. We are doing that through a market-led approach, looking at the market and trying to look at what the market demands and then working towards supplying the market, sustaining the market, and ourselves becoming sustainable. But also as a voice of farmers, we are trying to make sure that we gather all this information out there and we become a knowledge hub, making sure that the success stories that they've been talking about, where do we find them? For example, if today you wanted to have a database of all these success stories that are happening out there, can we maybe have a link where we can click and maybe be able to get such information? So that is why we are positioning ourselves to be a knowledge hub, be able to pick all those success stories that are out there in the field and have them all together so that we can always have peer-to-peer learning and be able to disseminate such kind of success stories. But also in the policy and advocacy aspect, and I will combine this also with the representation. We are trying to take a center stage to demand for services, to demand for favorable working environment, to make sure that we are ably represented. For example, now when we speak of the Food System Summit, as PAFO, we sit in the advisory committee that is making sure that it gives the election to the Food System Summit 2021. But we also have our colleagues who are, for example, members of the champions. They are participating in different action tracks and so on to make sure that really our voice is ably represented. But also when you look at the recognition of women and youth that is happening across, I think for us, it is very critical for us because we know women and youth contribute heavily in terms of transformation of the agriculture sector. They are the majority when it comes to employment in the agriculture sector. But when it comes to take back from what is produced, they usually take home peanuts because when it comes to the marketing aspect, it is usually the men that take a bigger share. So we are also giving priority to strengthening women and youth to be able to take part in the agriculture value chains. And lastly, we can't, discuss the rest minus talking about climate change and resilience. We know we've all seen the impact of COVID and how it has disrupted almost all the sectors, and agriculture was never spared either. So our focus is also on climate change. We have a global farmer-led climate change agenda dubbed the Climakers, where farmer leaders, farmers organizations are taking lead in providing solutions towards climate change, but also positioning ourselves to be more resilient to shocks. We've seen shocks happening every now and then. The other day is desert locust, tomorrow is floods, the next day is drought, COVID comes in. So we are trying to empower ourselves to be as more resilient as possible. But we cannot do this alone. That is why, again, we are calling upon all the different actors in the sector to build an ecosystem where we can come up with holistic approaches of addressing these challenges in a holistic manner. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Bebe.
Thank you so much, Ms. Simadala, for that very, very useful, very rich intervention. We have a few minutes for interactive discussion. On the Q&A, I have seen a note from a participant from Somalia. He has introduced himself as Mohammed from Somalia, and thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed, for your question. He's asking why Somalia was not invited among the panelists. He says it's one of the most productive countries in East Africa. Then the next question is, how can African countries be linked in terms of production? For the first question, when we, I think we've reached out to several countries, and we actually depended on those who have responded as early as possible. When FAO was invited to co-host this particular meeting, it was in a relatively short notice. So we tried to reach out to as many countries as possible. And as you can see, even in terms of representation, Ethiopia and Uganda, they are from Eastern Africa region, and Malawi is from Southern Africa. We don't have anyone from Central and Western Africa. So our apologies, but we will have more opportunities to engage our member states to share experiences. As I have said, we have also platforms for mutual learning and experience sharing among countries. But the question, how can African countries be linked in terms of production? It's a big question. It's a big question, and I mentioned about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that came into force from January 1, 2021. And we believe that most of African countries who apparently are dependent on imports of food, a lot of the figures, the amount of foreign currency that is spent on importing food items to Africa is, number one, huge. Number two, it's increasing from year to year. And it doesn't make sense for most African countries to continue to depend on imports, food imports, when they can really have comparative advantage in producing them. And also in Africa, I think the best we can do in terms of trading amongst ourselves and being a market for is in the agriculture and food systems. And so if you are referring to integrating production at the African level, I think it should be through trade. Countries, based on their comparative advantages, His Excellency Minister Umar Hussein from Ethiopia talked about the consolidation, land consolidation through cluster approach, and which is moving towards specialization kind of territorial. So based on those comparative advantages, if Somalia produces something that is at a higher productivity level, at a cost competitive basis, then it would form the basis for trade amongst African countries, but even beyond. If there are some questions, let me open the floor for more questions to come. You may raise your hands. Let's make it a little bit more interactive instead of question being posed from the moderator and panelists is asking. The panelists themselves can interact amongst themselves if there are some additional points. Yeah, okay. Yes, I was looking at the Q&A section, and again, Usman Sene also wondering why Senegal has not been invited. Yeah, as I said, I wish we could have invited. We could invite as many ministers as possible, but yeah. So, did I hear somebody taking the floor?
Yes, can I, please?
Yes, please introduce yourself and yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable, for this opportunity that you gave me to join you today in this wonderful panel, but touching on very important, highly matters for Africa development, especially among the LDCs, specifically transforming agriculture and food securities. My name is Dr. Sedina Sene, and I work for a national think tank called IPAR, and I'm an assistant professor at the university. I collaborate personally with GPSDD, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, on key initiative on data and partnership, trying to bring the role of data and how it can improve life via agriculture. The reason why I was asking why Senegal was not involved and was like, there are key advancements when it comes to really showcasing the role of data in collaboration with FAO and IFAD Senegal that really demonstrate the value of investing more in agriculture and the value also of engaging the community and building their capacity to really untangle the nexus between food security, nutrition, and agricultural transformation using data and AI. What I've seen so far as an evaluators on the ground was by enabling today stakeholders, especially communities, by giving them the voice and opportunity to learn using technology and then outsourcing data from them, I think we are creating a durable solution for them to be able to address issues of really productivity and food security on the ground. And then there are many examples like that in FAO project IFAD in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture that would be interesting to share with other countries, especially with Honorable Minister of Uganda, where we really have working relationship. And I would like, if there is any experience from those countries, the role of community engagement and really harnessing the power of artificial intelligence to really bring policy evidence in improving lives. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We highly encourage that NUR Forum from really this part of the world where researchers, policymakers, but also community are really interested in what is happening internationally and what are the key decision makers and recommendations that we can carry over to really share the voices and concern, but also successes of other farmers around the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Ousmane Sene from Senegal, for sharing that information, and thank you. Mr. Mohamed Iman Boulay, are you there? Over to you. Please take the floor. Mr. Mohamed Iman. Okay, so let's go to another person. Has no, Honorable Minister, did you raise your hand? Honorable Minister of Uganda?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, please.
I wanted to comment on the question of what can we do, make sure that our food systems are adequate. This is a very, very wide subject. I want to commend Madame Sarah Mbago because she touched many areas which are really policy areas, very, very important policy areas, which we need to look at. As we talk about food systems, we are talking about a whole range from the farmer, from production. We are talking about improving the productivity. We are talking about the whole value chain through post-harvest handling, or even harvest handling, post-harvest handling. And then we need to talk about storage, agro-processing. That is why, as I mentioned earlier, that Uganda, we decided to follow a program approach. It has been decided under our Undp 3, so that you don't move alone. This is a very wide, these are very, very wide subjects. The system must work together. And we have also found out that our farmers, the biggest problem has been the market, which Madame Salambago mentioned and elaborated on very, very well. Markets, Mr. Moderator, my brother, Your Excellency Abebe, even where you have been mentioning, you have talked very well about countries, African countries, importing when they have the biggest potential to even produce and export. We are still importing. That was a very wise, but we are saying that even where African countries have been given liberty to export to certain countries, European countries have allowed our African countries to export there. The Arab world, China, Japan, Russia, everybody, USA, they have opened the doors for us. But we have not had the systems that we are talking about. We have not had the systems right to make sure that we can satisfy or even send our products to those markets. So, Your Excellency, I just wanted to commend Sarah Mbago. I wanted to commend my brothers who are on the ministers for what they said, but I just want also to emphasize that the system is big, and I agree with the PAFO that really government must really put a lot of emphasis on funding the agriculture. It's really very important. We are just talking about it sometimes. Most of us, and I want to speak as a family, the African family. Maybe Uganda, maybe Kenya, maybe the others are doing well or better, or Rwanda, but still as an African family, we need to put more resources. And of course, our supporters, our friends, allies, must really make sure that the systems are put right. It's a wide range, the systems, the food systems is a very wide subject. And I want to say that we need to get our heads together to make sure that all that wide thing is tackled so that our farmers can continue producing, and they should earn from their sweat. And then we should assure everybody, including office workers, of food. People must have enough, and not only enough, but nutritious foods. So it's a whole range of the subject. It's a very big subject, which I want to say that FAO and the other friends who organized this meeting must really look at in a very special way. Thank you for allowing me that moment.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Well, you've emphasized on getting our systems right. I couldn't have said it any better. Excellent. Excellencies, Honorable Minister, distinguished participants, we're left with about 7 minutes before the end of this session. And we still have amongst us Dr. Agnes Kalibata, as you know, who is yet to speak. And I don't want to constrain her, but I have seen Ambassador Tanaka raising hands. And if in 1 minute, if you can please make your intervention, Ambassador.
Okay, it's my very honor to be part of this helpful meeting. I'm Ambassador Tanaka Chiripanyanga from Zimbabwe United Nations. I just want to know that is there any other African nation which is being left out in this program? I think that's the only question I have. Thank you.
Ambassador, which program are you raising? From which program? Are you talking about this particular session?
Yes, I'm talking about this particular session.
No, no one has been excluded. This is a member states meeting, and it's open to everyone. So when we are talking about having not invited, it is as panelists. We have only 3 ministers who spoke as panelists. So we're referring to that. Otherwise, the meeting is open to all members. So there is no one that has been excluded. There is no way that member states can be excluded from this kind of meetings. Thank you for raising those points. Now, Mr. Mohammed, 1 minute, please. I see Mr. Mohammed coming and going. If you are still there, please. I don't want to go without giving the opportunity to speak from Somalia. Are you there, Mr. Mohammed? Okay, I think there must be some kind of technical problem. Now it's an honor and privilege for me to invite my sister, my dear sister, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, who is the UN Secretary General Special Envoy to the UN, the 2021 Food System Summit. She has been doing an excellent job. I happen to be taking part in some of the dialogues, national dialogues, as well as independent ones. Thank you so much, Dr. Kalibata, for mobilizing, the constituency, not just from Africa, but globally, towards this, the summits that will be held towards the end of the year. So she was going to give us closing remarks. Dr. Agnes Kalibata, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bebe, and honorable ministers. Thank you also for having me here to come and talk to you today. I honestly think that the topic that we are discussing today, building sustainable and inclusive resilient food systems, could not have come at a better time, given all the challenges that you've already mentioned, but mostly given the very reason that we launched the Food System Summit. The Secretary General launched the Food System Summit because we are behind on all the SDGs, nearly all the SDGs. We are walking in the right, in the wrong direction. And Maximo mentioned a number of them, so I want to go through all of them. But let me speak to the one that is most dear to all of us, the whole idea of hunger, right? And the fact that hunger has been increasing for the last 6 months in a row. So that is really something that is extremely important, but also the whole idea of climate change and the fact that it is becoming extremely difficult for farming communities to be able to be productive as they should. And yet, for some time now, Africa had started seeing recovery. We're beginning to become hopeful that things are moving in the right direction. Economies were recovering. We were doing better on nutrition. But with the climate change, there's a lot that is at stake. And then with COVID, we have so much in terms of throwing people off balance, increasing inequities, and all those things. And many of you have talked about imports. And I just wanted you to understand, let me just give you a number so you understand what is at stake here. In 2008, when we had the global food crisis, Africa was importing $15 billion worth of food. A few years later now, today, we are importing $35 billion worth of food. In 2030, it is projected that we will import, is it $100 billion worth of food? I mean, and we keep talking about the opportunities amidst us. And for me, this is the biggest opportunity. And many of the ministers here, honorable ministers here, talked about it. The biggest opportunity that our the African Continental Free Trade Area that has just been launched is probably the biggest opportunity. Because each of you that talked went back to one key challenge, the challenge of markets and how we can open up markets. And I've worked in this space long enough to know that any farmer that has a market will buy seeds, will buy fertilizers, will produce, will send their kids to school, and will do all those things. So the elephant in the room for us is really the African Free Continental Trade Area and how we make it productive. And it's a huge opportunity. And I'm grateful that a number of ministers that came forward are talking about big ideas. The minister from Uganda is talking about multi-sectoral approach to problems, including a big opportunity that I see around the agro-industrialization and how that becomes a huge driver of what happens for inclusivity and for resilience. And the minister from Malawi is really talking about nearly the same thing and talking about strengthening resilience in new ways, looking at water, but also looking at markets that I mentioned earlier. And the Honorable Minister from Ethiopia is coming up with even bigger inclusive programs from the perspective of looking at local challenges, in this case, the local challenge in Ethiopia being the amount of land that farmers have access to, and then this program that is designed just to address that, to ensure that there's no farmer left behind, right? The cluster program, which is a program I've seen in Rwanda also being used from a consolidation perspective. So, you know, the challenges are known, the opportunities, we also have a very good sense of many of the opportunities. And I have no question in my mind that we are on the right path, but we must overcome the challenges that are imposed by our food systems. And those challenges are, first of all, that they are not delivering the nutrition we need. Secondly, that we are still living with hunger. Third, that climate change is a major issue and our food system is part of the problem, it's contributing. Fourth, that we have to deal with inequity and the inequities that exist in our environment. And fifth, that we must build resilience from climate change and from all those other challenges. So those are the objectives, as I've said them, that constitute what the summit is going to be focused on. Now, in conclusion, I really need you to know that the summit has prepared mechanisms for every country to engage. So we have food systems dialogues taking place at country level, and I really want to encourage honorable ministers, you to engage and your teams to engage, because this is how it does three things for us as countries. This is how we get to identify the challenges that are holding us back and be able to share them and even build multi-stakeholder solutions, like you said, Honorable Minister from Uganda. We must be able to identify the opportunities as well. This is how we bring in more private sector, and this was talked about as well by the Minister of Ethiopia about public-private partnerships and the opportunities we can put forward. But this is also how we identify solutions, and many of you have solutions that you are already implementing, but solutions that you can also share with the rest of the world. And we have action tracks that are receiving solutions from everybody and use these solutions to create a menu that countries can look at and really find solutions to their problems. You may see solutions to your own problems from these action tracks, but you may also contribute to these solutions through the dialogues you're having. So I just wanted to end on a note where I'm really requesting and really asking you all to pay a little bit of attention to the Food Systems Summit and ensure that the conversations are happening in your country, in your countries, the dialogues are going on right now. Please, let's ensure that we move and make sure that our voices are heard. Otherwise, the summit will come and happen and our voices were not there and solutions will be shaped and we didn't contribute to those solutions. Yet, as you've heard, we have great ideas that can be part of solving the problems the world is having. So I look forward to working with you all and really look forward to supporting you also in ensuring that these dialogues happen, but also ensuring that after the dialogues, we are also looking at solutions that we can all bring to our countries to deal with some of these problems that we are dealing with. So thank you again for inviting me. And thank you, honorable ministers, for the solutions you're putting forward, for the engagement, and for the work that you do every day. It's thankless in many times because you spend sleepless nights, but we are grateful that you do what you're doing. And we really look forward to supporting you. FAO is supporting you and other UN institutions are supporting you. And while this Food System Summit lasts, I will give you whatever support you need to ensure that you have these dialogues. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, for that very passionate address. Well, you know, many of you, most of you should have known that Dr. Kalibata used to be a minister of agriculture in her country, Rwanda. And in fact, I happened to be a witness of the leadership role that she has played, among others, in promoting prioritization of agriculture and food agenda in Africa. Powerful forces behind what is now known as the Malabo commitments. So it's a pleasure, Dr. Kalibata, to have worked with you, to have collaborated with you. Continue to do the great work. I can assure you that FAO and also other partners, IFAD and others, will continue to support the efforts. We are in it together. I know we don't have time. I wish we had longer time to have this conversation, but like all good things, this one is also coming towards an end. I want to thank all the honorable ministers, Sarah, Elizabeth, all the panelists for an excellent discussion today. The recommendations, the good ideas that you have contributed will be compiled and will be part of the report that will go towards the global meeting, LDC's meeting next year. So thank you so much, distinguished participants. We have had a very good, very productive session. Thank you. Over.
Thank you.
Well,